Chapter 961. Qin Mo's gaze turned cold. There was an obvious change in the atmosphere. His pitch-black eyebrows were raised, and his expression was frosty. Sitting beside him was Lin Feng, the one who didn't know how to read people's expressions. He turned towards Hoshino. "I heard from Mr. Hoshino that you admire our little spade?" Hoshino didn't avoid the question. Instead, he turned to Bo Jiao and smiled faintly. "Yes." When Hoshino said the word yes, Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Lin Feng still wanted to ask something, but he was stunned by the cold aura emanating from his captain. He could only shrink his head back. But even if Lin Feng didn't ask, it didn't mean Hoshino wouldn't continue. He seemed to have something to say to his fans since there were reporters around. "I've watched every single one of Spade Z's matches. Be it in terms of skill or character, he is worthy of a battle with the Japanese. At the same time, I hope Supreme Alliance can win the National League, which is also the reason I came to Supreme Alliance. I want to have a match with him." The Japanese vice-captain thought so highly of him. If this video was broadcasted, to a certain extent, it would definitely reduce the existence of some anti-fans. After all, Hoshino's words were right there. His fans would also treat Spade Z as a decent opponent. Most importantly, it was time for some people to calm down. Even Hoshino recognized Spade Z's ability. Those who had been saying that Bo Jiao had gotten to where she was because of their relationship had to think twice before they spoke, even if they weren't willing to admit it. Japan's influence in the esports industry. The strongest player in Asia had never failed before. Even the video of Hoshino's 1v3 against Xiangnan team was still on the internet. Almost everyone knew that he was a very low-key person. For him to give such an evaluation to Spade Z, most of the rumors would collapse on their own. Sensing the value of the news, the media at the scene immediately started a live broadcast. After all, they didn't expect Hoshino to admire a newcomer so much. For some reason, Feng Yi felt that it was dangerous to continue this topic. He glanced at his boss's side profile and forcefully changed the topic. "Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Hoshino. Supreme Alliance will fight well in the upcoming finals." It seems like Supreme Alliance is confident in themselves. The person who said this was Yu Cixin. When he smiled, he gave off a dangerous vibe like that of a wild leopard. When he said this, he looked at Qin Mo. If Hoshino wanted to play against Spade Z, he wanted to see just how powerful the legendary 3000 knife cutting was. Watching other people's matches, one could only see the surface. If one didn't fight personally, how would one know who was stronger? Facing such a gaze, Qin Mo's handsome face didn't change at all. It seemed as though no matter what Yu Cixin said, it wouldn't affect him. This made Yu Cixin raise his eyebrows. He really wanted to fight with this team that made Hoshino look at them in a different light. On one hand, he wanted to understand why Hoshino was so interested in this team. On the other hand, he knew that Qin Mo's win rate was higher than his in the individual competition records. Qin Mo's name had once been a legend in the esports industry. They had thought that they would be able to compete with this person back then, but they didn't expect Supreme Alliance to not even make it to the national finals. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for the Japanese to win that match. At that time, some of the seniors were still glad that Supreme Alliance didn't participate. But in his eyes, Hoshino was the person he wanted to study the most. As for Qin Mo, he was a suitable opponent. Yu Cixin lifted the edge of his lips. The reporters filmed the scene and pulled the topic back to Hoshino. Almighty Hoshino admires Spade so much, but he doesn't seem to have interacted with Spade before? Hoshino laughed, taking out his phone and showing them the screen. "I've followed him, but Spade hasn't replied. I'm still waiting." He really followed him? Why didn't they know? The reporters at the scene felt that their ability to capture news was terrible. Unbeknownst to them, Hoshino had added him before he came to the club. It was to make everything seem logical. Bo Jiao, who was familiar with him, understood his thoughts quickly. Even without any verbal communication, just a glance was enough to know what he was thinking, making everything seem logical. Bo Jiao smiled. "I don't usually use the official Weibo account. I'm going to reply now." With that, she took out her phone, her slender and fair fingers unlocking the screen. After logging in, she clicked on the latest follow. It was a simple exchange of fans, but it immediately caused a wave of discussion online. Especially Hoshino's fans. My almighty Hoshino actually follows other teams. That doesn't make sense. Who is this Spade Z? I've never heard of him. Is he from our country? I just went to search. He's the FC King of China's Zone C, Supreme Alliance's super rookie. Almighty Hoshino is interested in him? Previous poster, don't go off topic. I think it's a friendly follow. When has Almighty Hoshino ever followed others? I didn't see him like this during the International League. Take a look at the interview online. Almighty Hoshino said he wants to have a good match with Spade Z. He must be strong if he can attract Almighty Hoshino's interest. I've decided to take a look at this Chinese player. Faced with the sudden visit, the fans of Spade official fan club were a little confused, but that didn't stop them from welcoming him in a friendly manner. In an instant, Bo Jio's negative comments on the internet lessened. After all, Hoshino was the first to follow Bo Jio. With the addition of the interview, the topic of discussion soared. The media seized on this point, hoping for more interaction between Bo Jio and Hoshino. Lin Feng, who was sitting beside Qin Mo, felt a chill starting from his neck. Even his scalp felt numb. It wasn't because of anything else, but his captain's grip on the teacup tightened, his eyes losing the last bit of warmth. Lin Feng saw with his own eyes that a layer of frost covered that handsome face in an instant. Qin Mo looked in the direction of the two, his cold and noble side profile expressionless. His gaze was deep and unmoving. Lin Feng could understand his captain's feelings. Hoshino was treating Little Spade too well. But according to Little Spade, wasn't his captain starting to give Little Spade the cold shoulder? Why did he care so much? Lin Feng felt that the relationship between two men was even more complicated than the relationship between a straight man and a woman. He couldn't analyze it, so he just shrunk his neck and acted as the background. This was to prevent the captain from giving him a look when he said something wrong and letting him experience it himself. Fortunately, the interview wasn't long. If not, Lin Feng suspected that the teacup would be crushed by his captain. Yu Cixin was the first to stand up. He stuffed a hand into his pocket and looked at Qin Mo. I hope the next time we meet Supreme Alliance, it will be on an esports competition. By the way, Mr. Qin, have you thought of a way to deal with Xiangnan? Your team doesn't seem to be mature. The competition is about skills, not maturity. Qin Mo's voice was calm. His words stopped Yu Cixin from probing further. He smiled. Just as he was about to turn his head and ask Hoshino to leave, he saw that the tripod was showing signs of loosening. It looked like it was about to fall. Bo Jio and Hoshino were still standing under the tripod. Qin Mo had obviously noticed it earlier than Yu Cixin because the moment Yu Cixin's pupils constricted, Qin Mo had already moved. What he hadn't expected was that at that moment, the youngster moved as well. The youngster moved as well. Her movements were extremely fast, just like what he had seen countless times. Whether it was her landing or her focus, they were all beautiful, including her reaching out to grab Hoshino's wrist and stepping to the side, using her back to block him. It was reflected in Qin Mo's eyes. At that moment, he remembered the start of the Cold War. He hadn't taken the initiative to look for her ever since. He hadn't taken the initiative to call or send any messages either. When he saw her, he would brush past her. He wouldn't even smile as a passerby. But she definitely didn't know. He was in so much pain. Because in her eyes, there was someone more important. There was a dull thud. Qin Mo's shoulder withstood the pressure. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even the staff member who was originally in charge of the camera showed a terrified expression. No one had expected the camera to malfunction. Everyone's face was pale. They covered their mouths as they watched the scene unfold. When Bo Jio heard the noise, she turned over and saw the Almighty standing behind her, blocking the thing for her. He looked into her eyes, his thick brows furrowed slightly from the pain. His aura was burning brightly. His eyes were as clear and deep as the sea, tinged with a faint ink that could drown a person. His handsome face gradually turned pale under the light. The paler his skin was, the harder it was for people to look away from him. It was as though she could see his thoughts through his skin. Bo Jio suddenly realized something. She let go of Hoshino and stood up, opening her mouth to explain. Qin Mo had already kicked the camera away, heading towards the exit, leaving her with nothing but coldness. This time, Bo Jio didn't hesitate. She chased after him. Hoshino chuckled, straightening himself and turning to the dumbfounded crowd. I never expected Spade Z to be so skilled in real life. Fortunately, Hoshino was there to smooth things over. Otherwise, Feng Yi wouldn't know how to continue the conversation. The Japanese had met with an accident in their territory. If the news got out, the consequences would be dire. Right now, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's subconscious action. If it had been the other way around and Hoshino had protected Little Spade, Supreme Alliance would have been embroiled in a series of fights between anti-fans. The consequences would have been dire. Yu Cixin's emotions had already changed. He immediately rushed over and pulled Hoshino over. His voice was a little deep. "How are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." Hoshino turned, smiling faintly at Feng Yi. Fortunately, Spade was here. "Help me thank her." Yu Cixin's gaze dimmed. He glanced at the camera, his expression dark. But that was it. The media reports were basically about an accident during the interview, and how Spade Z had protected Hoshino. Feng Yi's situation was much easier to deal with, but he was more worried about young Master Qin's health. Even if he hadn't used much strength, the back of young Master Qin's shoulder should have been red. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was young Master Qin's back view, which seemed to have lost all his warmth. But what Feng Yi didn't expect was that even so, that person still maintained a trace of rationality. No, that wasn't right, it wasn't rationality, it was more like digging 3 feet into the ground to find a person. Because when he received the call, the voice on the other side of the phone was extremely cold. "Go check who touched the camera's tripod. I'll go check the video now." Feng Yi knew that this happened because of his incompetence as a manager. But he didn't expect such a problem to happen in the Qin Group Club. After all, no one in Jiang City dared to do such things in front of the Qin family. But Feng Yi wasn't sure if this incident was targeted at the Supreme Alliance or Little Spade. But no matter which one it was targeted at, in young Master Qin's eyes, it was probably a death sentence. Other than Qin Mo, it was obvious that Hoshino and Yu Cixin had realized something. The former was worried that this attack was targeted at Z. She had experienced too many similar incidents and was worried that this attack was targeted at Z. The latter was born in a country. His beast-like instincts made it hard for him not to think of conspiracies. But Yu Cixin knew that such a childish attack wouldn't be targeted at his identity. That position was either to disqualify Hoshino or to disqualify Spade Z. Based on the current situation, the latter was more likely. If Spade Z and Qin Mo hadn't blocked it, Yu Cixin would have suspected Supreme Alliance. But on second thought, if one of them was injured here, Supreme Alliance would suffer the greatest loss. Hence, this attack was definitely targeted at Spade Z. Yu Cixin raised a brow. With the youngster's skills, he could have easily avoided the tripod, but because he was afraid Hoshino would be injured, he used his back to block it. Was this really Spade Z's reaction after analyzing the pros and cons and not his instinct? If it was instinct, Hoshino and this Spade Z. Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. He didn't know that Hoshino was hiding something from him. Time trickled by. Bo Jiu rushed out and watched as the person hung up the phone. Without turning back, she held onto the railing with one hand and jumped over. But the person was already in the car and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Bo Jiu rushed over, her long legs blocking the car door. Her eyes were dark and she was about to speak. Chapter 962. Bo Jiu managed to stop him with much difficulty. Of course, she wasn't going to let him leave just like that. "Brother Mo, Your instinctive reaction wasn't bad," Qin Mo said, his gaze deep and his voice cold. Qin Mo spoke again, his gaze deep and his voice cold. "Should I be asking you how you met Hoshino? I don't even know you can't eat peaches. How many things have you been hiding from me? Do you want me to tell you everything? Every time I don't contact you, you don't take the initiative to contact me either. You do what you want to do and aren't affected by anything. I'm different. Every time I'm in a meeting, I'm thinking about what this person is doing. Why isn't she coaxing me? As long as she sends a word, even if it's just a phone call, a lot of things can be changed. In the end, you just don't want to reconcile, right?" Bo Jiu's fingers froze. She didn't know how to reply because the Almighty had hit the nail on the head. Qin Mo glanced at her and slowly turned his face. His black hair hung down, blocking his eyes. No one could see his expression. "Since you don't want to be close to me, we will separate as you wish." Both of us probably don't like people who cling to us. Clingy, these 4 words. Bo Jiao lost most of her energy. But instead of saying it for Bo Jiao, it was more appropriate to say it was for himself. Sometimes, even with all his sincerity and hard work, it only proved that the other party didn't care. Especially after witnessing the scene just now. Qin Mo reached out to close the car door. After a moment of silence, his voice was cold. Drive. The driver wasn't from the same family. When he started the car, he didn't dare to look behind him. The coldness emanating from Boss Qin seemed to be able to freeze him. Bo Jiao watched as the black Land Rover disappeared into the parking lot. After a long time, she walked out, her steps getting heavier. It was as though she had returned to her younger days. She had wanted to be alone but had been forced to leave with her father. She wanted to bend down because it wouldn't hurt so much. But Bo Jiao knew that to her, she could bend over anything except her waist. The burden she carried wouldn't allow her to do that. Bo Jiao inhaled deeply, leaning against the wall for a while. She wanted to smoke but realized there was only a lollipop in her pocket. It was the one the Almighty had bought for her. Bo Jiao took it out and held it in her hands. She thought she would never forget it. There was a woman who always kept 2 candies in her coat pocket because she liked candy. He was clearly such a cold and noble person who never ate sweets. Bo Jiao reached out and pressed down on her silver fringe. When she opened her eyes again, there was an obvious change in her pupils. He pressed the familiar string of numbers on his phone. Hoshino, who was standing beside Yu Cixin, took a step back. I'm going to relieve myself. Yu Cixin raised his eyebrows and said with an indescribable evil aura. Be careful. Hoshino glanced at him. Got it. This person always treated others like porcelain dolls. It was interesting. Crossing the corridor, Hoshino took out the vibrating phone from his pocket and placed it beside his ear. Hello, Z. Who knows about your team coming today? Bo Jiao's questions were always direct. Hoshino knew what she was getting at. The reason should be within Supreme Alliance. Our visit was decided by Captain at the last minute, and the other members aren't aware of it yet. Hence, the person who tampered with the camera must be someone from here. Other than the cameraman, the only person in charge is the floor supervisor. But from the looks of it, the person must have escaped. After the disguise, it would be hard to leave a trace even with the camera. Bo Jiao was calm. That organization has their eyes on Supreme Alliance. More accurately, they have their eyes on me but they wouldn't know I'm Z. Which means someone is trying to drag me down to deal a heavy blow to Supreme Alliance. I'm sure you have found out what exactly happened to Qin Mo, right from the start. Bo Jiao had wanted to know why her puppy had lost his memory. Now, she wanted to know even more. Her intuition told her that the terrorist organization's main target this time was the Almighty. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. I did find some information regarding Qin Mo and the person who impersonated you. They knew each other and almost became lovers. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. Lovers? Bo Jiao's fingers stilled, her gaze wavering. Hoshino's voice was still ringing in her ears. But for some reason, Qin Mo started to treat this person coldly. It could even be said that he hated her. Bo Jiao lowered her voice. That isn't strange. According to the Almighty, he wouldn't tolerate a criminal who hacked into someone else's computer. It has nothing to do with that. Hoshino paused when he heard the voice. Do you want to hear my analysis? MMH? Hoshino sighed inwardly when he heard the dispirited reply. He broke into a faint smile. Z, it's such a waste of your intelligence. You're really clueless when it comes to relationships. Before she could open her mouth, Hoshino continued. Qin Mo's matter is covered up deeply. Even with your identity, the information we can find is limited. That means we are only looking at the surface. What happened to Qin Mo is something only he knows. So the theory of lovers doesn't hold water. The main point is Z, the person who impersonated you this time. Her brother was dealt with by you. At that time, someone exposed the hacker's hidden information to some powerful people, using the internet to control people's thoughts, just like the maiden's sacrifice. Even though the method is different, the truth is the same, distorting the truth and causing people to lose their bottom line. An entire school of students to a certain extent become people who can harm others at any time, but they don't know it. Do you still remember what you said at the time? The scariest thing isn't the devil but the human heart. Bo Jiu glanced up, her gaze deepening. So it's him. Hoshino paused. Back then, you and Qin Mo worked together to send her brother to prison. Now that she's back, her target is Qin Mo, revenge. Bo Jiu's handsome face was especially distinct under the sunlight. Her brother killed many people. It seems like she has inherited his legacy. Hoshino glanced out the window. It wasn't just revenge. She was even more vicious than her brother. She wanted Qin Mo. In order to get what she wanted, she destroyed everything around her. Human lives weren't important to her. The dignity and innocence of others were just tools to be used. The maiden's sacrifice had destroyed too many people. Her first target wasn't the young lady you saved but Shui Yaoyao from your team. At that time, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao's actions. Back then, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao. Her target was always those who were still working hard. You should understand what her brother and she wanted to destroy. They wanted to control the world because that is how human nature is. But back then, she was just testing. A small test that caused Shui Yaoyao to be wronged for a few months. After that, she made her move in Tokyo. When she felt that it was about time, she came to China and started the official maiden sacrifice. This world shouldn't be like this. Some people clench their teeth and live their lives. They can't speak the truth after being oppressed because the moment they speak, people will jump out to oppose them. There are others who commit murder, commit arson, steal other people's hard work, steal other people's works. They will be forgiven. It won't be like this forever, Bo Jiu interrupted. If not, what's the point of our existence? That's right. Hoshino laughed, his eyes bright and his teeth white. It won't be like this forever, so it's time for us to take action. What do you intend to do with Li Shui? She definitely won't admit to her crimes and those who don't care about plagiarism will try their best to clear her name. Bo Jiu raised her hand, shielding her eyes from the glaring sunlight. When you weren't around, I hired a good lawyer. His surname is Bai and he has never lost a case. If Li Shui doesn't admit to her crimes, we will sue her until she does. Her mother knows that even if she wins the case, the compensation would be minimal. Based on Li Shui's personality, she might not even apologize and the people who scolded her will continue to scold her. But that isn't important. What's important is that the people who care about her know that there is still justice in this world. They protected the most important thing for the person they love. That person can finally rest in peace. It's strange that you know you hired a lawyer. Hoshino stuffed a hand into his pocket. It seems like Qin Mo has affected you quite a bit. Do you like him? At first, Hoshino assumed that the person on the other end would hesitate, even if it was just for a second. But she didn't. When she spoke, there wasn't a hint of hesitation. Yes, I like him a lot. I want to kidnap him and bring him back to the Fifth Avenue. Fortunately, I'm still rational and didn't carry out the plan. But I don't know if I can control myself in the future. She was so honest that he didn't know how to reply. Hoshino supported his forehead with his long and fair fingers, his lips lifting. In that moment, he didn't know how to reconcile his feelings. The person who had always been a loner finally had someone she liked. But that person wasn't him. Hoshino inhaled deeply. Don't torture us single dogs. But we won't be together. Hoshino didn't know how to reply to her next words. He's from the police and I'm an international criminal. In the movies, princes and princesses are always together. Which prince and evil dragon are together? The prince will only kill the evil dragon but the Almighty won't kill me. I'm so handsome, he won't want to see me or hide far away from me. It was worse than this. Bo Jiu didn't tell Hoshino her last sentence. Instead, she changed the topic. Do you have a photo of that person? Hoshino knew who she was referring to even without Bo Jiu's explanation. There are only some blurry ones. She is like her brother, never leaving behind any photos. But do you remember the address you gave me previously? It's an internet cafe beside Qin Mo's university. She should be staying nearby. She might even be staying in school. Bo Jiu's eyes twitched. She rented a house outside but doesn't stay there. When she isn't on a mission, she stays in school. Even if she is on a mission, the school's network would be more convenient since the public IP isn't easy to locate. Hoshino caressed his phone. You think she's a student? 90%. Bo Jiao glanced down at the lollipop in her right hand. If she's a student, it would be a useful disguise for her. Besides, the university isn't far from #1 middle school, making it easier for her to locate her target and help her. More importantly, it's Qin Mo's school. You mentioned that if she wants to get him, the best way would be to become his schoolmate or join Supreme Alliance like I did. There are only 2 females in Supreme Alliance, me and Yao Yao. That eliminates the possibility of her being in Supreme Alliance. The only other possibility left is that she's his schoolmate. Hoshino retracted his gaze from the window. I understand what you mean. I'll focus on the investigation. Someone is coming. Take care of yourself. I'm hanging up. MH. Bo Jiao hung up. She glanced at the phone screen. She resisted the urge to call Qin Mo. She continued to use the method to keep herself busy. But this time, while she was busy, Hoshino's words kept flashing through her mind. They had almost become lovers. Which meant that the Almighty knew her. But the Almighty seemed to have forgotten about it. How did that happen? What exactly happened back then? Since Hoshino hadn't been able to find anything, she could only hack into the data of some special forces. And since that person liked to impersonate her so much, she could only use her own methods to prove who was the real one. Now that she knew her target was the Almighty, she couldn't let that person continue to roam free. She had to settle this matter before she left. Even if the Almighty didn't want to talk to her anymore. The sun moved west. The black Land Rover didn't drive back to the Qin family's house. Instead, it stopped at a bar. The bar was near the school. Qin Mo didn't look at his injured back. He sat at the bar counter, tugged his tie, and ordered a row of drinks. The driver had already been sent away. Qin Mo didn't show much emotion even when he was drinking. But his elegant and handsome side profile was clearly much colder. He drank one glass after another, as though that was the only way his back wouldn't hurt so much. He thought that the guy must not have even noticed that he was injured. Because at that moment, she probably only had Hoshino in her eyes. Qin Mo laughed softly. His lips were slightly lifted, but there wasn't a hint of a smile. Instead, there was a sense of decadence and loneliness. Chapter 963. In the darkest corner of the bar, a girl came in after Qin Mo. She sat there and watched Qin Mo for a long time before breaking into a sweet smile. She walked towards Qin Mo with her beautiful eyes. Senior Qin, I didn't expect to meet you here. Qin Mo shifted his gaze away from the wine glass, sweeping her a glance. He didn't say a word. You should have forgotten my name. The last time I almost fell down the stairs, you were the one who supported me from behind. The girl tilted her head. She was wearing a skirt and had short hair. Her fingers were slender and looked like a cello player. She smiled at Qin Mo as though she wasn't bothered by his coldness. I'm Fan Jia, senior brother Qin. Remember me this time. Qin Mo remained silent, pushing his glass over, gesturing for the bartender to continue. Fan Jia chuckled lightly. She stood at the side, her eyes bright and teeth white. Senior Qin, you don't look happy. Do you want to say it? It will make you feel better. In that instant, something surged in Qin Mo's mind. He looked at the girl and found her familiar. She had short hair and the same face shape as that fellow. But her eyes weren't like that fellow's. They were extremely dark and clear like water. He started to think about that fellow again. Little Fu Jiao, who haunted him. That fellow who looked like a multiplication table. Qin Mo furrowed his brows. He was supposed to be impatient, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes when he thought of someone. Senior Qin, what's wrong with your back? Are you injured? Fan Jia reached out. Qin Mo glanced over, his gaze icy. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Fan Jia blushed but didn't get angry. I'm just worried about you. When Qin Mo heard this, he stood up, picked up his jacket and made a call. He didn't know who he was calling, but he said faintly, I drank too much, come and pick me up. Lin Feng was baffled when he picked up the call. After all, he never thought that his captain would call him. It seemed like he really had too much to drink. Lin Feng's heart churned. He had witnessed the entire scene today. The unhappiness between his captain and Little Spade was obvious. Little Spade was really a withered spade. Between being punished by his captain and being a loyal brother, Lin Feng chose the latter and called Bo Jiu. "Hello, little spade. Don't say I'm not loyal. There is a bright path for you to sleep with captain again. It depends on your courage." Lin Feng crossed his legs as he spoke. "Captain is drunk. His coordinates are at the bar next to a university. He's getting someone to pick him up. Do you want to go?" Bo Jiu didn't hesitate. Her reply made Lin Feng mutter, "Aren't you afraid of death? Only you would dare to target captain." "I'm near a university. It's convenient to head over. I'll take a cab now." She added, "In the future if you wish to sleep with Almighty Yun, I'll help you." Lin Feng roared in his heart. "I'm a straight guy. I don't want to sleep with my own brothers." Unfortunately, the phone had already been hung up. Chapter 964. After Bo Jiu hung up, she hopped into a cab. "Sir, the White Knight Bar near a university." At this hour, the traffic was starting to get congested. The cab wasn't going fast. She didn't understand why the Almighty would call Lin Feng, but only a naive person like Lin Feng would ask her to fetch the Almighty. When Bo Jiu alighted, she was prepared for the Almighty's cold stare. After leaving the club, the Almighty went straight to the bar, clearly in a bad mood. He had been like this when he had been young. When he was unhappy, he would reject others. No matter how she tried to coax him, he wouldn't budge. What a troublesome little vixen. Back then she had been thick-skinned. But from the looks of it, she wasn't that thick-skinned. Bo Jiu glanced down at the time on her watch before walking briskly towards the bar. She bypassed the car parked in front of the door and saw a cold figure standing under the neon lights. It was a very noble and different person. Bo Jiu prepared herself mentally. Basically, she was prepared to be rejected. She took another step forward. At this moment, she saw him clearly. The Almighty's battle uniform was half open, revealing the white t-shirt underneath. His short black hair and tall nose showed off his beautiful side profile. His facial features were clear, and his eyebrows were clear and his eyes were clear. He held a cigarette between his slender and fair fingers. Because he had drunk some alcohol, his fringe drooped down, reflecting his deep eyes, making him look even more wanton and unrestrained. The Almighty raised his eyes and glanced at her. It was obvious that he had already sensed her presence. Bo Jiu could hear her heartbeat. She thought of many things she wanted to say, but when she saw the person behind the Almighty, she paused. It was a short-haired girl with a sweet appearance. She seemed to have been standing there for a while, a bright smile on her face. She seemed to be talking to the Almighty. She could vaguely hear the word senior. This was... Bo Jiu paused. She wasn't sure how the girl had come. Was she drinking with the Almighty? Bo Jiu couldn't be blamed for thinking that way. She had never seen anyone so close to the Almighty. Even though they hadn't had any physical contact, there was an indescribable feeling. But there was an indescribable feeling. It seemed like they knew each other. Based on her understanding of the Almighty, if he really hated someone, he would definitely ask the other party to leave. Did the Almighty come alone or did he have a date? Bo Jiu wasn't sure if she should continue walking over. At this moment, the girl also raised her eyes. At first, she was surprised that Gu Shijie would appear. Then she smiled, revealing her dimples. Senior, that's Spade Z, right? He's even more handsome in real life. Qin Mo remained silent. Bo Jiu suddenly felt that her presence was unnecessary. Her heart sank and she was about to turn. How long do you want me to stand here alone? He asked in a low and familiar voice. Bo Jiu glanced up. She wasn't sure if he was talking to her. Besides, he didn't seem happy that she was here. The man stubbed out the cigarette in his hand and threw it into the dustbin. He pulled open his uniform jacket and walked towards her. She didn't even have the time to react before he walked towards her. Her vision darkened as someone covered her with a jacket. Bo Jiu was about to move. But the voice beside her ears was still cold. Don't move, I don't want to see you now. Bo Jiu's fingers stilled. She didn't know what to do. As expected, it wasn't a good feeling to be hated by the Almighty. She was so handsome that even the Almighty didn't want to see her face. In the future, she wouldn't be able to use this face to win any benefits. Since when did her face become a minus factor? Bo Jiu took a moment. It was too difficult for her to stay still. Just as she was about to take a step, she saw the person walking towards her from under the jacket. Before she could do anything, she felt herself being picked up by someone. Didn't he not want to see her? Why? Brother Mo. He ignored her, but she could feel his familiar peppermint tobacco scent lingering at the tip of her nose. Bojo didn't move. The tip of her nose touched Qin Mo's chest through the jacket. She couldn't see anything as he carried her. Her fingers tightened on the jacket, her heart racing. She didn't understand what the Almighty meant. Was he really going to throw her into the dustbin? After all, the Almighty had been looking at her with disdain, as though he wanted to get rid of her. Speaking of which, why wasn't the Almighty surprised that she was the one who came to fetch him and not the naive Lin Feng? Just as Bojo was thinking about it, she felt herself being placed on the seat of a car. It was probably the Land Rover she was familiar with. Because of the surrounding environment, even if she couldn't see it in front of her, she knew that the furnishings around her were familiar to her. Just as she was about to say something, her chin was lifted. After the jacket was slightly lifted, a cold kiss came in. Bojo's pupils wavered. Her lips were pried open. All she could feel was the aroma of the wine pouring in, and the tipsy feeling made her lose all her thoughts at that moment. The tip of their tongues touched, bringing with it a scent that she hadn't felt for a long time. Bojo could only lean against the seat, unaware of the situation around her. Half her face was covered by the jacket and she was in a sorry state from the kiss. The Land Rover was parked in the parking lot marked out by the bar. There were many people passing by. Qin Mo was wearing a white t-shirt, bending over and kissing. Who knew how many people stopped in their direction? That kind of scene seemed to only appear in comics. But no matter how curious they were, they didn't know what the youngster looked like. How exactly did he think of such a way of kissing? They could vaguely see the figure but not the face. But just by looking at the figure, they were definitely good-looking, especially Qin Mo's long legs and waist. His half-bent waist exuded an innate aura. Even his kiss was domineering. Those who whistled and those who tossed and turned did it. Qin Mo acted as though there was no one else around, kissing her until she was exhausted. After a while, he released her and pinched her chin again. He bit her lips, continuing to taste the sweetness that she didn't want to let go of. Bojo didn't know what was going on around her, allowing Qin Mo to kiss her. Gradually, she lost all her strength. The sounds seemed to have weakened. No matter how loud they were, they became the background in her ears. It was as though there was such a person in this world. When he kissed you, you could only hear your own heartbeat. Everyone saw the kissing scene. Fan Jia, who was standing not far away, saw the entire scene. Her fingers tightened, and when it reached a certain level, her eyes overflowed with venom. She really didn't expect that after planning for such a long time, a chance to drink alone with him, it would be gone just like that. And why was Qin Mo still in such a state after Spade Z saved Hoshino? She had received news that the two of them were in a cold war. And why was he starting to like boys? That person clearly liked girls. She had always thought it was because of the novelty. The novelty was the excitement that the youngster brought him. Because in the esports scene, he probably hadn't met such a person. The FC King of Zone C, it was hard not to notice this title. She had seen young Master Fu play before. It was no wonder he was interested. Fan Jia had always known that other than Z, Qin Mo was most interested in his sports. In the past, she had tried to get close to him, but it hadn't been effective. This young master of the Fu family had only occupied that position because he had appeared in the most vacant period of his life. He was really lucky. Fan Jia stood there, her gaze deepening. Watching him kiss someone made her want to kill the person he was kissing. It seemed like she hadn't been forceful enough. Fan Jia's gaze deepened, but she didn't show any emotions. It was time to find an alliance. Fu Zhongyi was the best candidate. Amidst the envious whistles, Feng Jia disappeared into the night. She believed that as long as she continued to lay low, she would be able to obtain that person completely. She would let young Master Fu have him for a few days. She would snatch him back. Because she knew better than anyone what could attract his interest. In the Land Rover, Bojo sat there, watching the pair of eyes that were as beautiful as the stars, panting softly. She didn't know how she had offended the Almighty. His coat covered him again, and his whole body was covered. Through the jacket, the Almighty's lips pressed against her, the fragrance of sandalwood lingering in her bones. His voice was still cold. "Who asked you to appear?" He didn't want her to show her face. Bo Jiao wanted to lift her lids, but her head was already pressed into his embrace. Then she heard the Almighty on the phone. "Drive over." There was a driver? Then why did he get Lin Feng to fetch him? It seemed like the Almighty had drunk too much. Bo Jiao arched a brow, feeling as though the Almighty was looking in her direction. But she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Actually, his thoughts were simple. The moment he saw that person's face, he would lose his principles. Hence, he didn't want to see it. But because of that person in his arms, many feelings changed. The pressure on his chest disappeared without a trace. Even if he didn't see it, he could imagine her gloomy expression. He would leave her alone. That way, he wouldn't be able to see through her thoughts. Qin Mo's gaze deepened at the thought of her instinctive protection. After all, she was the most obedient when she was gloomy. Bo Jiao couldn't see any of this, which was indeed gloomy. She couldn't see anything. She tilted her head and heard the sound of the car. After walking for a while, she asked, "Brother Mo, when can I show my face?" Chapter 965. But Bo Jiao knew it was a light punishment. She sat there for a while. When she felt it was enough, she tried to suggest, "Brother Mo, I think you'll feel better when you see my face. I'm so handsome, I can beautify the air." "I don't need you to beautify the air." His voice was slow, his fingers touching her lips through the jacket. "You better be quiet, I don't want to see your face or hear your words, understand?" "Understood. Who couldn't be at Sundra, little fairy?" Bo Jiao nodded, not saying it out loud. She knew the Almighty didn't want to reconcile with her this time. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror more than once. Boss Qin could just ask someone to leave if he didn't want to see them. Why did he have to cover his face? He turned and planted a kiss on the top of her head. He didn't understand the boss's world. Perhaps no one could understand. He liked someone too much and was a proud person. If it had been someone else, he would have ignored them. But this fellow... He forced himself not to think about it but used Lin Feng to make her appear. Yes, Qin Mo's phone call wasn't something he would make when he was drunk. As the captain of the Supreme Alliance, he knew every member's personality. When that naive Lin Feng received the call, his first reaction would definitely be to inform this fellow. Qin Mo glanced down at the youngster in his arms. He was still thinking about what he should do with her. Since he couldn't think of anything, he decided to bring her home. The Land Rover entered the military courtyard. Bo Jiao's hearing was sensitive. She could hear the sound of the gun. The car stopped. Qin Mo carried the person he had covered with his jacket down and placed her on the bed. Bo Jiao took a moment. The moment she reached her hand out, her lips were kissed again. This time, the kiss was deeper. When her head sank into the pillow, her breathing became erratic. "Our relationship isn't just in bed, understand?" That hoarse voice, accompanied by his breath, landed on her lips. It was still a little cold. "You have to take responsibility for provoking me." Bo Jiao muttered, "I've always been responsible." "Your responsibility is to save Hoshino." Qin Mo's voice was calm. Bo Jiao didn't know how to reply. Qin Mo glanced at her, released her and stood up. Bo Jiao knew this was the end. She couldn't make up any more stories. Qin Mo's back was facing her as he replied, "Forget it." Bo Jiao's fingers froze. She wanted to say something but it wasn't possible. There was the sound of the door closing. It was obvious that he wanted to chase the guest away. Even though she knew that, she didn't want to move. He maintained this position for a while. It was as if it was absorbing the last bit of sunlight. The night outside began to turn dark. Qin Mo sat in the study room that was just a wall away from his bedroom. Listening to the commotion, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He held the silver cigarette lighter in his hand, and when he flipped it over, he saw that it was a USB flash drive. If not for Lin Feng's call, she probably didn't even think to ask where he was. Things that were forced would always be very painful to prick. Even the gifts were the same. There was a moment of silence. Qin Mo knew she was about to leave. He smoked a cigarette, as if that was the only way to suppress the boredom. Just as he turned his head, the study room door was pried open. The person who pried open the door stood there. I'll leave after I help you apply the ointment. Qin Mo extinguished the cigarette, his voice calm. Someone will be here in a while. Her only excuse to stay was gone. Bo Jiu finally understood that the Almighty didn't want to see her. They had never been so polite with each other. Until a sound from downstairs broke the silence. Movie Queen was back. She walked over when she saw the light in the study room. With just one look, she could see the problem between them. Just as Bo Jiu was about to leave, he grabbed her. Jiu, since you're here, I have something to ask for your opinion. Don't leave today, let's have a good talk. Bo Jiu glanced at Qin Mo, replying, all right. Qin Mo's clenched fists loosened as the word left his lips. Since they were going to stay, they definitely had to eat dinner. Movie Queen had already decided to arrange for them to sit together. But that was all in the future. Movie Queen was smart. She never asked the children what had happened. She did have something to look for Bo Jiu. I have a movie, the director has asked me twice to be his lobbyist. Movie Queen added a piece of bacon. I think the role is suitable for you. Why don't you take on the role and I'll tell you about the weakness of my cold son. Bo Jiu never knew how to reject someone like Movie Queen. I have to wait until after the competition, but I'm not sure what the situation will be. Besides, I don't know how to act. Once the competition ended, she would find an opportunity to leave. It doesn't matter. Movie Queen reached out to pinch the youngster's face. You don't have to act. The director said you can just sit in front of the computer and play games. You can appear as yourself. That's all. Just treat it as a favor. Since Movie Queen said that, Bo Jiu couldn't reject her. The director is looking for an esports player? No, it's a hacker. Movie Queen was delighted. In the movie, it's my son. I've always wanted a handsome and caring son like Jiu. Your brother Mo is too cold. Not cute at all. It wasn't easy to reply. Bo Jiu lowered her head and ate the rice in her bowl. She couldn't help glancing at the empty seat beside her. Deep down, she knew why the Almighty hadn't come down to eat. It was because of her. Chapter 966. The moment Movie Queen finished her sentence, Bo Jiu's phone rang in her pocket. The unique ringtone made her pause. She whipped her phone out. The caller ID wasn't displayed, but the string of numbers was extremely familiar to her. Besides, she knew that Hoshino wouldn't have called her if it wasn't something serious. Bo Jiu turned to Movie Queen. Apologies, I have to take a call. Then she stood up. When she reached the entrance, her entire aura changed, especially her eyes, which seemed to be covered with a layer of light. It made her look like a devil in the night, dangerous and mysterious. Hello. Something happened to Rao Rong. Hoshino swiped the screen. Everyone in the esports industry is saying that there's something fishy about your match. Fishy. Bo Jiu arched a brow. MMH. Hoshino replied. Someone said that Rao Rong didn't go all out in the match and lost intentionally because someone placed a bet on the match. If Supreme Alliance won, the other party would earn a lot. That isn't all, the crime squad has taken Rao Rong away, claiming that there is evidence pointing towards Rao Rong being the mastermind behind the maiden sacrifice. The organization wants to push Rao Rong out to divert everyone's attention. Bo Jiu's gaze deepened. The son of a hero shouldn't be treated this way. Rao Rong worked harder than anyone else in that match. If it wasn't for him, the other party would have lost badly. Hoshino broke into a warm smile. Shall we take action? MH. Bo Jiu glanced at the sky. Let's meet outside the police station. It seems like you've already thought of a way to slap them in the face. Hoshino hooked the keys on the table. I'll prepare the costumes and props. Which one do you need? Bo Jiu took a moment. A wooden guitar, a white t-shirt, a black trench coat, a mask, hair dye and a motorcycle, something cool. What are you going to do? Hoshino glanced down at the information in his hands. You're going to use a guitar? Bo Jiu lifted her lips, a hint of devilishness in her eyes. Since I'm returning, I need the audience to prove it. If not, I won't be able to answer to their efforts in impersonating me. Z, you're breaking the rules again. Hoshino's eyes lit up brightly, as though he had been in a daze for a long time. I understand. I'll see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Bo Gio hung up and turned towards movie queen Anne, who was watching her. She felt slightly embarrassed. She wanted to see the Almighty again, but time was tight and he might not want to see her. Bo Gio knew that the Almighty was still angry and it would be best if she could stay. But compared to that, she had more important matters to attend to. Auntie Anne, I have something urgent to attend to, I have to leave. Movie queen Anne could tell from Bo Gio's expression that the youngster had something urgent to attend to. At her age, she was able to see the bigger picture. All right, you can go ahead. It's time to make my cold son anxious. Otherwise, he will never understand that sincerity is the most important thing in a relationship. Brother Mo is great. It's my fault, I wasn't sincere enough. Movie queen Anne watched the youngster's serious expression and couldn't help breaking into a smile. Who would take the blame? Her cold son must have accumulated good fortune in his previous life to have met such a sensible child like Joe. Movie queen Anne glanced at the youngster's serious face and couldn't help but laugh. Who would take the blame? Her cold son must have accumulated good fortune in his previous life to have met such a sensible child like Joe. Movie queen Anne chuckled. Joe, you'll be at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. Movie queen Anne chuckled. Joe, you're at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. Movie queen Anne chuckled. Joe, you'll be at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. It had been the same when she had been young. On the surface, she seemed to be at a disadvantage. But in reality, every time something happened, he would be the one shielding her. A family like Madame Anne's had high standards for upbringing. Grandpa Anne was even more so. He had raised the Almighty like a prince. He played the piano well and knew how to play chess. While she had been wandering outside like a clay figurine, the Almighty had come to meet the foreign guests in his little suit. The Anne family's house was right next to theirs. Even though it was the same villa, the Anne family's house was clean. Every time she climbed over the wall and knocked over a flower pot, Grandpa Anne would ask and the Almighty would say that he had accidentally knocked it over. There had been one time when she had opened the Anne family's safe. The Almighty had taken the blame for her. He had been punished by Grandpa Anne to stand for a long time. If it had been the Almighty, he would never have made such a mistake. In his eyes, such mistakes were childish. He had never been punished by Grandpa, and Bo Gio could still remember the way her little puppy had stood in the middle of the living room. He hadn't been impatient at all. But he hadn't been happy at that time. When he had tugged her hand over, his expression had been cold. Little Bo Gio, are you an idiot? Bring the medicine box over. Bring me the first aid kit. If I find any blood on your hands on my sheets, I'll throw you out the window. Bo Gio was used to such threats. She didn't think much of it. Besides, the Almighty had been the one who had bandaged her hand. He probably didn't mind it being dirty. That day, she had hugged her little puppy and slept soundly. Before he had fallen asleep, he had muttered in her ear, "You're so stupid. I guess the safe has to be changed." From that day onwards, all the locks in the Anne family's house had been changed to electronic. Back then, Bo Gio had told herself that she would take good care of her little puppy. That was probably the reason why Bo Gio didn't want to receive that person's hateful gaze one day. Movie queen Anne watched as the youngster lowered her gaze. She reached out to push Bo Gio, a faint smile on her face. She had the demeanor of a mature queen. All right, you can go now. I'll talk to Brother Mo. Bo Gio didn't have time to stay any longer. But it was good that she had left. The Almighty would probably come down for dinner after she left. After leaving the military courtyard, Bo Gio glanced at the time on her phone. Then she hopped into a taxi. As the city lights lit up, the night came to everyone's side. The nightlife in the city center started to get lively. There would always be many people near the commercial plaza. The most eye-catching advertising screens hung on the skyscrapers. Everything was a show of life. In the study room on the second floor of the Qin family's house. Chapter 967. The computer screen lit up, a familiar sound reverberating in the study room. It was the sound of a player entering the game. It could be said that this was the first special effect used in the video. As the video unfolded like a story, the game characters appeared. China Mo looked at the two familiar IDs, his eyes widening in shock. This was before that guy had joined Supreme Alliance, when they had cleared a dungeon together. No, that wasn't right. China Mo looked at the video, his game character and the youngster's game character dashing towards the other party's wilderness like two gusts of wind. This wasn't just a video of them clearing the instance. It was all the video clips of the two of them fighting side by side. From the moment they first met to the current National League, every scene was presented in this manner by her. Of course, China Mo knew how much time and effort it took to edit these videos. Moreover, some scenes had to be searched. He had originally thought that this was the end. But it wasn't. At the end of the video was the photo they had posted on their official Weibo. A line of words appeared on it. I hope to have someone like you, like the cool breeze in the mountains, like the warm light in the ancient city, from morning to night, from the wilderness to the canyon. As long as it's you, it's all good. China Mo didn't head down because he had seen this video clip. It wasn't long, only around 7 to 8 minutes, but it was hard to believe that it was during normal times. But when he saw the last sentence, China Mo forgot to move. He just stared at the computer screen. For the first time, he felt that even if it was out of his control, it wasn't a bad thing. His heart seemed to be struck by something. He couldn't help but stand up and walk down the stairs, his eyes scanning the surroundings as though he was looking for someone. There wasn't anyone on the sofa, at the dining table, or even in the kitchen. China Mo wanted to search the other side. Movie Queen and walked over and stopped him. You don't have to look. He has left. China Mo's fingers paused, his brows furrowing. Left. Mage, it should be something urgent, you. Before Movie Queen could finish her sentence, her well-mannered son grabbed his jacket from the sofa and walked out the door without turning back. He was still fuming. It was rare for Movie Queen to be so impatient. She strode over. Son, don't blame me for not reminding you. Joe seemed to have received a call from a friend. It seems like that friend treats Joe pretty well. You have to understand that there are many people who have feelings for Joe. If you continue to be so cold, you might really lose Joe. It's better to have a sense of crisis in a relationship. Even without his mother's reminder, China Mo already knew. Otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Perhaps in the eyes of others, China Mo could get whatever he wanted and had the dominant position in this relationship. But in reality, if anything happened, she would be the one who could leave easily. However, it was enough. After China Mo saw the video, he told himself that since she didn't want to say something, there was no need to say it. Including Hoshino. All he wanted to do now was find that girl, take her in his arms, and tell her that she belonged to him. Chapter 968. In the early summer, every city had its own way of life. Northerners liked to drink beer with spicy crayfish and meat skewers. Southerners rarely ate spicy food, but they would go shopping with a few girlfriends. Although these were different, there were still similarities. There would be many people gathered in the commercial square of every city. It was even more so in a metropolis like Zhongqing. The big screen hanging on the building was very high visibility. Not only the people standing there, but even the cars going back and forth could see clearly what was on it. Under normal circumstances, it would be the advertisements of various celebrities. At around 7 p.m., the sky was not dark yet. This was the time when Zhongqing was the most congested. In the middle of the bustling street, located in the commercial city center, was a landmark of China. Cars that came here would have to wait for a period of time even if they were unwilling. Everyone knew the reason. It was too risky. The commercial square had a wide range of activities. There were coffee shops like Starbucks, Burger King, etc. There was also a small fountain in the middle. Many people were walking back and forth. There were young people chatting, old people with children, and even a group of cool high school students playing skateboards. At this time, a pure black tomahawk, like a beautiful wild leopard, stopped in front of the fountain with a swoosh, and a handsome tail swing attracted almost everyone's attention. In front of everyone was a tall and straight young man. His long legs supported himself by the side of the motorcycle. Then, he got off the motorcycle nimbly and took off his helmet, revealing a pair of deep peach blossom eyes. The young man was wearing a black mask, so people couldn't see his face clearly. Even so, just looking at his figure made people's hearts beat faster. So handsome. This was the exclamation of the girls. The guy at the side raised his eyebrows. That car is really handsome. It was a limited edition. How much did it cost? I'm talking about the person. As the girl said that, she turned back to look at the young man who brushed past her. She mumbled, "He's really handsome. He's holding a guitar. Is he going to sing? I want to stay and listen. Aya, why didn't he take off his mask? I want to see how handsome he is." He definitely didn't take it off because he doesn't look handsome wearing it. That's fine too. Leave some room for imagination. What song do you guys think he will sing? That's hard to say. It's coming. The onlookers were all very enthusiastic. After all, the sight of such a handsome young man with his face turned to the side and tuning his guitar was enough to make people stop. Not to mention the equipment the young man had brought. Instead of the usual microphone, he wore something that looked like a headset on his ear. The crooked part was a small microphone. Needless to say, the youngster looked even more handsome with the equipment. Then, the young man smiled at the girls who were looking at him. A series of exclamations could be heard. I can't take it anymore. It's so cool. The young man lowered his head, took out some wires, and inserted them into a small notebook. Just when countless people thought that the youngster was playing a small sound system to make it easier for him to choose the music, the computer screen had actually been split into two parts. This was because the USB drive that was plugged into it had already determined that this was a network intrusion. As for where the intruder was, Bojo glanced over, a smile on her face. Her silver short hair was now black and stuck to her left ear. The diamond earring reflected the lights, glinting like a black gem. His slender fingers moved up and down on the keyboard. His hand speed was so fast that no one saw the codes that appeared one after another on the screen and the dialog boxes that kept popping up. It wasn't difficult for her to hack into a commercial plaza since there was a public network here. There were countless people using the Wi-Fi account. It was easy to create a loophole in the system. In a short 30 seconds, Bojo had broken through the firewall of the shopping mall. From the surveillance room, she controlled the broadcasting rights of the entire plaza. At the same time, she set up many virtual IPs. Bojo wasn't worried that the police would lock onto her. The logic was simple. Anyone in the commercial plaza would be holding on to an electronic product. Regardless of whether it was a phone or a laptop, it would become the originating IP. But she still had to speed up. She was most afraid of going up against the Almighty. Fortunately, Smith was in charge of the crime squad. It's time to greet an old friend. Bojo smiled faintly. She pressed the enter button and hid the dialog box. She hugged her guitar and straightened her body. This time, Bojo was back to Z's style. She wanted to tell the police that she was here and that they could catch her if they had the ability. Shall we start? The girls couldn't wait any longer. Bojo tilted her head, making the final adjustments. Her voice rang out. Hey, MMH, sound test. He's so cute. You call him cute no matter what he does. It's just a sound test. Are you jealous? You should grow up like him. I'm your boyfriend, not him. What's there to be jealous about? Even though that was what she said, the jealousy in her voice could be heard. The girl smiled sweetly at the side. As more and more people crowded over, Bojo finally lifted her lids. When she looked at them, her clear voice rang out slowly. Use your good morning to accompany me for dinner. Remember to save your thoughts in the piggy bank. I look at the twinkling stars in the sky. I hear the cowherd telling the weaver girl to be brave. When the voice rang out, everyone's eyes lit up. Even through the mask, the charm of the youngster's voice couldn't be suppressed. But, what song is that? It's so good, I've never heard it before. Is the generation gap here? Come over. Let your boyfriend explain it to you. You were still in primary school when the song was released. Go, don't disturb me. Perhaps it was because the youngster's eyes were too beautiful, or perhaps it was because of the gentleness in her clear voice. More and more people stopped. Bojo sang softly, her lips curving up. Aren't you afraid that we are on opposite ends of the earth, watching your greeting? Riding a magic carpet, flying at the speed of light to me. You let me see the North Star and the Cross Star as a companion, without my arm as a pillow. Are you used to it? Your telescope can't see the loneliness of my northern hemisphere. The Pacific Ocean's tides follow the Earth back and forth. I'll wait patiently, waiting for the day you reach the shore. When she reached the word shore, she turned and glanced at Hoshino, who was smiling faintly at her. Both of them were wearing masks, but they exuded different auras. If the young man was cool to the point of being devilish, then Hoshino, who was standing quietly in the crowd, was like spring water flowing in the mountains, like a prince. With their chemistry, they just needed a look to start the operation. In that instant, Hoshino broke into a smile, glancing up. There was a loud swoosh. The big screen that was originally playing the advertisement suddenly changed, and a big Z appeared. No, it wasn't just the various screens in the commercial plaza. It was also the same word that appeared on the phones of the people walking in the crowd. Some people who had watched sci-fi blockbusters immediately thought that it was a hacker attack. The entire commercial plaza was in an uproar. Everyone was fiddling with their phones, but the screen was frozen, not moving at all. At this moment, a manipulated voice appeared on the various screens in the plaza. Before I introduce myself, I have to greet my old friend. Smith, I heard that you came all the way from the Fifth Avenue to China just to catch me. TSKSK, the more you suffer, the braver you become. Even after so many failures, you still refuse to give up. But I'm really annoyed that you mistook me for someone else. The moment this sentence came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the police. The commercial plaza immediately took measures to remove the network intrusion. But when they sat at the service counter, they realized that the computers were no longer under their control. The network attack this time was too sudden, but it didn't affect the normal operations of the shopping mall. It only occupied the screen. But even so, the people in charge of the shopping mall expressed that they had never encountered such a situation before. Usually, large shopping malls like this would have police cars parked nearby. The patrolling policeman reacted quickly, informing the station at the first instance. It could be said that the local police station was busy to a new height that day. Such a case was too unique and had a negative impact. They couldn't handle it properly, so they could only report it to the higher-ups. At that time, Smith was sitting in the interrogation room, looking at Rao Rong opposite him. He arched a brow. I finally caught you, Z. Rao Rong didn't speak, his hands cuffed. His brows were the same as before, but the corners of his lips curled up, revealing traces of mockery and sorrow. The arrest came very suddenly, and the accusations were overwhelming. Honestly speaking, he didn't mind going in. If his father could be vindicated, he was willing to do anything. But the moment the crime squad charged into the club, he clearly saw that person's gaze had dimmed. He was probably disappointed. Be it him or his team members. Rao Rong lowered his lids, glancing at his cuffed hands. Who knew that he used to really love esports? Why aren't you speaking, Z? Smith chuckled, looking confident. You don't have to think of an excuse to escape. China isn't like the Fifth Avenue. You can't escape even if you want to. While Smith was speaking, Lin Chintao and his team members were being interrogated beside Rao Rong. Regarding Rao Rong, I would like Mr. Lin to provide us with some evidence, the interrogator said politely. Lin Chintao hadn't said a word since he entered. As the most powerful witness, they had to pry his mouth open. But his demeanor made it difficult for them to get any information out of him. He was good-looking and talkative, but at this moment, Lin Chintao was more silent than anyone else. Mr. Lin. The interrogator was about to take the gentle route. Lin Chintao suddenly spoke, his voice low. Do you know that person? What? The interrogator couldn't react. Lin Chintao glanced up, his eyes bloodshot. Rao Rong, what kind of person is he? The interrogator remained silent, glancing at one another. Lin Chintao didn't seem to care what others thought of him. When I first joined the team, I was always at the bottom. My hand speed wasn't fast enough and I couldn't keep up with my tactics. Many rookies weren't willing to team up with me, feeling that I was a burden. They blocked me in the changing room and forced me to leave the team. It was the captain who stood in front of me, telling me that talent was important but hard work was more important. He told them not to form small groups and ostracize other members. For the sake of the team's victory, he would stay up until 1 in the morning to study the best strategies of each member. He would often lie in front of the computer, revealing the brightest smile for every victory. When he lost, he would tell us that it didn't matter, we could try again next year. How could such a person purposely lose the National League for money? Back then, when the relationship between the team and the club was at its most tense, he took the risk of being frozen by the club to speak up for us. Many companies tried to poach him, but he didn't leave because of us dragging him down. Do you know what the older members repaid him with? They forced him to leave the team, causing him to waste 2 years in his sports. The club kept sending in useless relatives. If it wasn't for the captain, we would have died horribly against Supreme Alliance. The interrogator paused. Mr. Lin, I know you have a good relationship with Rao Rong, but this isn't the time to be emotional. If you can provide us with evidence, we will be able to get to the bottom of the case. I don't have any evidence. Lin Chintao's gaze was resolute. Because I don't believe Captain is that kind of person. The interrogator knew he wouldn't be able to get any results even if he continued, hence, he left the room. He shook his head at Director Huang. It's too difficult. Any progress on Smith's side? Director Huang's heart sank after listening to Lin Chintao's words. Perhaps it was because of these experiences that Rao Rong had changed, just like his father. Ever since Rao Rong came in, he only said one thing, which was that he was the one who did it. He didn't say anything else. Does that mean he confessed? Yes. It had been a smooth interrogation, but because of that, Director Huang wanted to ask more questions. But Rao Rong's attitude. Director Huang sighed. The person beside him reminded, the higher-ups want to close the case as soon as possible. The maiden's sacrifice has caused a huge impact. The media has heard that the culprit has been caught and are still waiting for the verdict. Director Huang paced back and forth, glancing at the time on his watch. Call for a press conference. Yes. Chapter 969. Director Huang lowered his gaze. When he saw the live stream, his eyes widened in shock. He snatched the phone over, a single word flashing in his eyes, Z. Smith was still looking at Rao Rong, trying to dig something out when the interrogation room door was slammed open. I think you should take a look at this. It was Director Huang. Smith frowned, his body stiffening as he bolted upright. That's impossible. The Real Z is in the city center. The IP address is in the plaza. Director Huang's reaction was much calmer than Smith's. We have to take action immediately. Smith listened to the voice in the video, the veins on his forehead popping when he heard the word, "Hey." It's really him. D*MN. That's why we caught the wrong person. Director Huang glanced at Rao Rong, turning towards the crime squad members who were still looking at their phones. Stop looking. Hurry up and inform the professionals to lock onto Z's location. Yes, yes. The crime squad had never been in such a mess. Everyone was moving as fast as they could. Found him. Suddenly, there was news from the technician. Smith's eyes lit up, leaning over. Where is the exact location of the mall? 2nd floor. The moment the technician said that, he added, No, that's not right. It's the 6th floor. That's not right either. It's outdoors. Smith grabbed a handful of hair. Where exactly is it? The technician wore an earpiece, watching the screen filled with red dots, his voice trembling. That's impossible. That's impossible. How can there be so many IP addresses? It was harder than ascending to the heavens to identify Z among so many IPs. Smith clenched his fists. D*MN. He's using this again. Let me tell you where I am. If you have the ability, come and find me. His arrogance was the reason why the Interpol couldn't stand him. He felt as though he was flaunting his intelligence in front of him. There were so many people in the plaza. Which one was he? Director Huang panicked as well. The video was like a virus, spreading crazily on the internet. Now, there was only one person who had a solution. Director Huang whipped out his phone, dialing a familiar number. Hello, Chinamo, the Real Z has appeared. Chinamo received the call and was on his way to the Fu family's house. When he heard the last sentence, his fingers paused and his gaze deepened. It was like a vast ocean, making it hard to read his emotions. His handsome face was reflected in the car window. He didn't seem the least bit flustered by Z's appearance. It was as though in his heart, this day would come sooner or later. Chinamo instructed the driver to turn around while speaking to Director Huang calmly. Give me a simple explanation of the current situation. The moment Director Huang heard that emotionless voice, he knew he was saved. He explained Z's appearance from start to finish. Chapter 970. Director Huang stilled, muttering, "Why didn't I think of that?" Chinamo didn't listen to him. He continued, "Arrange for all the police to head to the scene. Z isn't done with his task." "Not done?" Director Huang glared at him. "What else is she trying to do? Our Jiang City's police force is going to be slapped in the face by her." Chinamo glanced out of the car window, his gaze deep. "You caught the wrong person. She is seeking justice for Rao Rong." Director Huang paused. "It's our fault, but Rao Rong has admitted to the crime. I can't do anything about it. Send people to the scene." Chinmo's tone remained the same. "Move in plain clothes." Director Huang replied, "All right." He then asked, "What about you?" Chinmo glanced at the long queue of cars in front. "I'm rushing over." "That's good, we have to catch Z. You don't know how passive I am after her actions. I still have to explain to the higher-ups, Before Director Huang could finish, Chinmo hung up. Director Huang choked. Why did he feel that Chinmo was still the same as before? He didn't like to hear Z's bad points. In reality, Director Huang didn't know that he wasn't the one who felt passive. Instead, he was sitting in the dorm room, staring at her phone, her left hand clenching tightly around Fan Jia. Due to the commotion caused by the incident, the other roommates in the dormitory were also watching. After a girl saw the video, she couldn't help but sigh. "I always feel that Z is very handsome. What's going on?" Fan Jia lifted her head abruptly. The girl was taken aback by her stare. For some reason, she felt a chill run down her spine. What's wrong?" "Nothing." Fan Jia held onto her phone, a sweet smile on her face. "I'm going out for some fresh air." After walking out of the room, Fan Jia's expression sank. Z was still alive? How was that possible? She hadn't seen Z's face. But she knew some information. At that time, they had clearly set up a plan to kill that person. Why was Z back? That wasn't all. She was in Jiang City. She was right beside them. D***. Fan Jia swung her arm, smashing her phone against the wall. Z. Who exactly was it? It was destined to be a restless night. The Major Crimes Division mobilized all available vehicles, just to encircle an international criminal. Regarding the maiden's sacrifice, you don't have any leads, but I can provide you with a few clues. Smith, my old friend, the mastermind, is a girl, a student from a university. She isn't even 23 years old and has a sweet appearance. She can't be the Rao Rong you caught. I'll show you the evidence later. No, I'll show everyone the evidence. There was once an esports player who wanted to seek justice for his father after losing his father. He took many detours, but he had never let anyone down and wouldn't fight a meaningless competition for money. Why did he come out? He wanted to tell the female student who impersonated me that your hacking skills aren't up to par. When the people in the commercial square heard the last sentence, there was an uproar. Some of the police officers at the scene had already started to intervene. Chapter 971. Look! The audience surrounding the youngster suddenly pointed at the big screen behind the youngster when they heard the high-pitched singing. At this time, the content above had changed. Rao Rong's side profile appeared on the screen along with his father, a hero who wanted to report corruption but was silenced. The photo looked old because Rao Rong was obviously different back then. He was very young. Pieces of evidence were displayed in front of everyone through the video. It was like a 2-minute film. But this movie actually existed in real life. It included the scene where Rao Rong was chased out by the club, and after his return, he didn't hesitate to offend the club in order to replace the worst player the investor had arranged. And what Rao Rong had said at the end of the competition. At this moment, it wasn't just the people in the square watching the video. There were also Rong fans holding onto their phones, suddenly feeling like crying. They had liked this person for a long time. Those who had been with him till now all knew what kind of person he was. That person was the strongest sorcerer in the esports scene, one of the 3 pillars along with Almighty Xiao and Almighty Qin. He wouldn't play any sports match that went against his own conscience for money. He wouldn't really lose his humanity. There was too much unfairness when it came to that person. It would indeed cause a person to be twisted. Perhaps it was because he had such a father. That was why he could survive in the cracks. But at the same time, someone had let down his youth. At his peak, his family had been ruined and he had been in such a state for over a year. He was someone who loved esports so much. Do you still remember the youngster who had stood in front of his teammates when he first debuted, wearing his uniform and smiling? That scene had been in the past for too long. For a long time, why didn't they see the almost extinguished light in that person's eyes when he appeared again? What exactly did he go through to become the complete opposite of what he had been in the past? He had been maliciously suspected, expelled by the club, betrayed by his teammates and robbed of his glory. However, even so, in the end, he hadn't done anything that went against his conscience. He had wanted to redress his father's grievances, going against the organization, but he hadn't executed the organization's orders. It was because he had told himself that he would only punish those who deserved to be punished and not the innocent. In the face of some pointed evidence, he couldn't deny it, because if he did, his father would be wronged for life. When everyone saw the final scene, not only the ordinary people, but even the members of the key case investigation unit who were still on duty stopped in their tracks, their eyes red. Rao Rong's father had brought them along. President Qin. Not far from the commercial square, a Land Rover was still queuing up to enter the parking lot. The driver looked at the screen in the distance and couldn't help but turn to look at his young master. Qin Mo's eyes were also on the words on the screen and the old photos. Then, he pushed open the car door, held the metal bar in front of him with one hand, and jumped over. His black trench coat drew an arc in the wind. The driver opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. After all, the young master's appearance just now was really handsome, very different from his usual self. Just as everyone was looking up at the big screen, Qin Mo walked into the crowd, holding his phone as he dialed Director Huang's number. There's no need to search inside. Z is outside. Director Huang, who had already entered the mall, was confused. Outside? How do you type on a computer outside? You have to ask Z, Qin Mo replied faintly. Qin Mo's voice was calm. The view isn't as good in the mall as it is outside. Also, we can see the police's movements from here. Get our men out and move quickly because Z is already wrapping things up. Director Huang widened his eyes. Wrapping things up? The video on the screen is still playing. How can it be wrapping things up? Z's network attack can be delayed. Qin Mo walked through the crowd, his eyes sweeping past the people that walked past him. Then, he headed towards the fountain. You can ask Smith about this. Director Huang pressed his throbbing head. Smith has already gone crazy. Is that so? Z slapped him in the face? This method is indeed maddening. The higher-ups should have taken action. Do you still have Rao Rong's father's file? I want to take a look. Qin Mo's gaze was as deep as the night, walking as though he was searching for someone. Director Huang fell into a rare silence. It's a little difficult. It has been more than a year and it will take some effort to present some evidence. But for his case, the difficulty lies in the fact that the person in charge of his sentence and the file management has already retired. Some of the information has also been lost, making it difficult to reconstruct the situation. Which means someone has tampered with the file. Qin Mo's voice sank. Then check who he wanted to report back then. The information has been lost and there must be an internal problem. At this point, Director Huang understood that the person they were looking for was most likely someone with a high position and authority. As for how high this person's authority was, Director Huang glanced up at the screen. To be able to bury a grievance for such a long time without even seeing the light of day, it had to be someone in charge. Director Huang's heart couldn't help but tremble. If it wasn't for Z's video, the grievance would never have been known. Z, the evil hacker, had chosen to use such a method to make a comeback. Was it to let everyone know the truth? Director Huang's body trembled. When he looked at the screen, his expression changed. This was Z's intention? In that moment, Director Huang seemed to understand why Qin Mo had never believed Z was the culprit from the start. Even if their modus operandi was very similar, even the way they acted was 90% similar. But in terms of intention, it was worlds apart. Z was using a hacker's method to do the same thing. To cry out for justice. To let the truth be known and to return justice to the victim. Even so, Director Huang didn't believe their path was the same. Because they had to consider more. That was right. Someone like Z would become the ideal hero in everyone's heart. But to maintain peace, they had to rely on the strict policemen who were constantly on the move and didn't even have time to eat when they were busy. Against Z. Even Director Huang felt that it was a pity. But he still had to say that people with different beliefs couldn't make plans together. In the past, Qin Mo had deviated when it came to Z. Therefore, this sentence could not be more suitable to be used on these two people. Among all the criminals, Z was the only one who could earn Qin Mo's praise, no one else. But a criminal was a criminal after all. He believed that Qin Mo had a balance in his heart. And now, Z had appeared again. Even he didn't know how Qin Mo would deal with it. Outside the plaza, the crowd was surging. The video on the screen was still playing. Qin Mo suddenly paused, the corners of his eyes arching. Where was the singing coming from? He furrowed his brows for a moment, then followed the sound and quickly walked over. At this moment, the singing stopped. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed in that instant. At this moment, the youngster in the middle of the plaza removed her guitar from her neck, placing it behind her back. Bo Jio's actions were natural, just like a singer by the side of the street, packing her belongings and heading home after encountering trouble. She bent her long legs, closing the laptop on the ground. The speed was still running. There was a minute delay. To Bo Jio, a minute was enough. She turned, but didn't go to the motorcycle parked at the parking lot. Because she knew that if she rode the motorcycle now, it would be a signal to the police that she was there. She carried the guitar and walked into the crowd. Bo Jio was still wearing a black mask. Even though the police had moved from the inside to the outside of the mall, there were two policemen who brushed past her. They didn't notice that the person they were looking for had walked past them, heading towards the crowd. Bo Jio didn't walk quickly because most of the people around her were still immersed in the video. Their emotions and walking were heavy. At this moment, it wasn't a good thing to walk quickly. Some of the girls watched as the youngster, who had mesmerized them, walked with them, their hearts beating faster. They hadn't expected the youngster to walk in the same direction. They wanted to ask him where he was going and if it was on the way. Just as the girls' faces turned darker, the youngster suddenly glanced up. The young man suddenly looked up and saw a tall and straight figure standing in the crowd. It was as if he was a god waiting for a rabbit to come to him. Bo Jio's fingers stilled, her pupils trembling. She started to analyze the situation. There was still a distance to walk from here to there. But she couldn't just turn around and leave, because that would only make the Almighty notice her at first glance. Hence, she could only face him head-on. This situation was similar to the first time they had met at the Fifth Avenue. The difference was that Bo Jio already knew how formidable her opponent was. She had seen the Almighty, but he hadn't seen her. Even if he had seen her, she had disguised herself. But Bo Jio wasn't sure if her disguise would work in front of the Almighty. Bo Jio watched as the distance between them shortened. Her left hand, which was in her pocket, clenched tightly. 90 meters. 80 meters. 70 meters. 60 meters. Bo Jio counted the numbers in her mind. There were 2 times when the Almighty's gaze swept over her. Her heart didn't seem to belong to her, beating rapidly. She had to think of a way. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would be recognized. Chapter 972. Hoshino, who was as gentle as jade, reached out to press down on his earpiece. "I'm here." Create a small commotion to divert Qin Mo's attention. When Bo Jio spoke, she tilted her head. Her voice was so soft that no one around her could hear what she was saying. "Qin Mo?" Hoshino adjusted his position, catching sight of the tall and aloof figure. His fingers paused. "Okay." The moment Hoshino said okay, Bo Jio and Qin Mo were only 20 meters apart. If it wasn't for the person in between, it would have been 20 meters. If it wasn't for the person in between, the Almighty would have recognized her. The Almighty would have recognized her long ago. Even the ticket seller at the cinema hadn't been able to escape the Almighty's sharp observation. This time, even Bo Jio wasn't sure how high her chances of escaping were. But wouldn't it be more exciting this way? The youngster curled her lips into a smile. Listening to the discussion about her behind her, she suddenly paused and turned her head back. The black mask covered most of her face, but her voice was gentle and a little low. You guys seem to like the song I sang just now. The girls' hearts started racing. They looked at the youngster's beautiful eyes, feeling as though they were being sucked in. What was this? She was suddenly being hit on by a pretty boy. And it was the pretty boy they had been trying to get his contact details. MMH? Why aren't you speaking? Bo Jo tilted her body. Even her shoulders were a little low. After all, with her height, she had to lower herself if she wanted to listen to a normal girl's words. The young man's shoulders were lowered, as though he was listening to what she had to say. The scent of the young man wafted towards her, and a pair of deep eyes stared at her. He was so handsome that it made her breath quicken. Any girl would feel their heart racing when they were stared at like that. The girl who was being hit on felt a little dizzy, her cheeks flushed. MH, I like it. I'm planning to sing at the next intersection. You can follow me if you like. The youngster's gaze was so sincere, her aura gentle and gentle. It was hard to resist. Follow, you have to follow. He's asking me out. He's definitely asking me out. The girl smiled happily. Bo Jo maintained their intimate position. There were still 5 meters left. At this moment, Qin Mo's gaze landed on him. Not far away, a loud and clear sound suddenly rang out. Z. Where's Z? No one knew who said it, because it came from the crowd. But it was such a sound. This attracted the attention of all the police. In addition, there was a person who was flying through the crowd. His speed was so fast that the people on the other side immediately moved. Even Qin Mo's figure shifted for a moment. But it was only for an instant. As soon as he took a step forward, he immediately retracted his leg. Those eyes were very deep. Don't go over. He spoke to Director Huang through the Bluetooth earpiece. But it was too late. Once they took action, there was no turning back. This was the norm when carrying out a mission. In addition, there were so many people in the commercial square. Even if an order was given, it would be very difficult to return to its original position. However, this also showed that the person was very close to him. Sun Tzu's Art of War. A diversion. Qin Mo's handsome side profile was more dignified than ever. The corners of his lips lifted slightly, his eyes sweeping across everyone around him. Qin Mo's smile made Bo Jo feel danger. Even after such a huge commotion, the Almighty still hadn't left. The immense pressure was similar to the time she had been in the Fifth Avenue. She had avoided the police easily, but not this person. Her wig had been removed and she had been forced to fight. Today, she didn't want to fight. Because if she fought, she would definitely lose her position. Losing her position meant that her identity would be lost. Fortunately, she was prepared. She was prepared to prevent the Almighty from falling for her trap. To be honest, everyone who played hero had a lot of tricks up their sleeves. Under normal circumstances, the culprit would appear. Wouldn't an ordinary person move? The Almighty stood there without moving, as though he was waiting for her to come to him. Bo Jo arched a brow. Just as she was about to meet the Almighty, she suddenly turned and asked the girl beside her, "What's going on?" They seemed to be arresting someone. The girl only had eyes for the youngster. Bo Jo laughed lightly, her tone natural. "Do you want to take a look?" "I don't think so. Will it be dangerous?" After all, the commotion was huge. She wasn't sure what would happen. Were all boys curious? The girl tilted her head towards the youngster wearing a black mask. "All right then." Bo Jo sounded helpless. She raised her left hand and pressed onto the backpack on the girl's back. Her voice was low and warm. "It's a little heavy. Can I help you?" It's fine. The girl blushed. "You can just stand beside me. Why do you need to carry the backpack?" Bo Jo laughed softly. "I really don't know what to do with you." That pampering tone. Someone was drunk. Some people frowned slightly when they saw this scene. The latter was Qin Mo. The moment he locked onto the youngster, he almost suspected that he was the person he was especially familiar with. However, their posture was too intimate, as if they were a couple who had just started dating. Z wouldn't bring a girl with him. Besides, the intimacy wasn't fake. It shouldn't be. There wasn't any time for Qin Mo to confirm anything. Amidst the crowd, the couple had already walked past him. Qin Mo glanced back, suspicion still lingering in his eyes. Walking in front, Bo Jo could feel the Almighty's burning gaze behind her. It was as though he could see right through her. Fortunately, the girl reacted at this time. She blushed and said, "Can we always be together later?" Bo Jiu felt as though every girl was her angel. "Let me take a look, if it's possible." It was this last interaction that caused Qin Mo to shift his gaze away from the youngster's back, towards the other person. In reality, Bo Jiu didn't know that it was her back view that made Qin Mo even more suspicious. Fortunately, Bo Jiu had prepared beforehand. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for her to escape this time. The girl was the key. Bo Jiu smiled. Successfully escaping from the Almighty was a great achievement for her. The girl watched from the side and couldn't help murmuring, "He's really handsome." It was also these 4 words that were faintly floating in the air, and the message within them was captured by others. Qin Mo, who had shifted his gaze away, suddenly turned his head back. His dark eyes emitted the fiercest glint. Actually, Qin Mo wasn't the only one who noticed the problem. Even Bo Jiu knew that there was something wrong with the 4 words. Which couple would use such a tone to compliment each other's handsomeness? *T flashed across Bo Jiu's mind. She was 1 step faster than Qin Mo. Before the girl could react, Bo Jiu heard the youngster apologize. He heard the young man say, "Sorry." Then, she turned around. The youngster's black bangs scattered over her forehead. Her skin, which was not covered by the mask, was fair and translucent, as though there was no color in it. Her slightly pursed lips carried a trace of stubbornness, as though someone was about to recognize her, and she felt that this game was not that fun. The next second she was pushed out by the youngster, her words echoing, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want him to carry you." MMH? Before the girl could react, she was pushed into the arms of another person. The smell of peppermint tobacco made the girl pause for a moment. That person. The girl lifted her head for a moment, her attention instantly captured by the beautiful curve of his chin. Qin Mo furrowed his brows heavily. He moved her away and ran towards the youngster. Both their figures and skills were very beautiful and handsome. As they shuttled through the crowd, it was as if they were filming an American blockbuster. Bo Jiu moved swiftly while observing her surroundings. She arched a brow slightly as she glanced at the figure in front of her. She took large strides forward, using the momentum from her body. With 2 loud thuds, under everyone's watchful eyes, the youngster leaped over the car and landed on the roof. *CK, he's so handsome. This can't be a movie, right? Qinggong. It wasn't any Qinggong, it was ninja skills. As the young master of the hacker world, if she didn't have such skills, she wouldn't be able to make a living. But even so, when those girls saw this scene, they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The youngster standing on the roof was extremely eye-catching. She didn't forget to toss her guitar to the side when she did this. She successfully became a stumbling block for the person chasing after her. If it had been anyone else, they might have fallen. But the person chasing after her wasn't anyone else, it was Qin Mo. With a beautiful turn, he bent his long legs slightly and heard a loud thud. The guitar was kicked into pieces in mid-air. Bo Jiu heard the sound but didn't even turn her head. Amidst everyone's exclamations, the young man took a step back and leaped from one roof to another like a bolt of lightning. Then, he jumped out of the car. Taking advantage of the gap between the red lights, he rolled on the ground, got up, and dashed toward the opposite side of the road. Some people from the Key Case Investigation Unit noticed the commotion. But it was useless. The youngster wasn't just skilled. When this person moved, his speed was especially fast. Moreover, he was in the middle of the road. How were they going to catch him if he could use such a method? They could only rely on young Master Qin. That was what the crime squad members were thinking. He was too far away and they couldn't shoot him. At the start of the operation, young Master Qin had instructed them not to use guns. But even if they had guns, they wouldn't be able to aim. The youngster's mobility was too strong. She didn't leave the crowd. It wasn't easy for them to shoot. It was the same even when she barged into the crowd. The crowd had assumed that the youngster would leave just like that. But what they didn't expect was that there was another figure following closely behind. His slender legs and his black windbreaker fluttered as he moved, making everyone feel that they must have come to the wrong place. To be honest, both of them were equally skilled and fast. The only difference was the length of their legs. Qin Mo's legs were longer than Bo Jiu's, and the Almighty was good at predicting her escape route. The moment she moved, the Almighty would know where she would land. Hence, the distance between them narrowed. Just as she was about to be caught, Bo Jiu turned and threw something behind her. Swoosh! It was a pack of cigarettes. As Qin Mo dodged, he asked faintly, "Don't you have anything else to throw?" Bo Jiu didn't reply. Any turn would give the other party a chance to catch her. The Almighty's height and long legs gave him a natural advantage. Bo Jiu ran, kicking the wall beside her. Using the recoil, she sped up and flipped over the railing in front of her. Still not giving up? Qin Mo arched a brow, rushing over. He didn't need to kick the wall to catch up to the cold figure. The difference in leg length was indeed useful at a crucial moment. Bo Jiu didn't have anything else to throw other than the USB lighter in her pocket. But if she threw it out, her identity would definitely be exposed. Right at this moment, Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. He estimated the distance and reached out with his left hand, grabbing onto the youngster's shirt. Bo Jiu paused. Without hesitation, she flipped in the air, using the recoil to temporarily escape the fate of being dragged back. But that wasn't the end. Qin Mo was already close to her. This meant that she would either win or be caught. The moment she thought about it, she would be met with shock or disgust. Bo Jiu seemed to have an endless amount of energy. Her relationship with the Almighty was strained. If she was caught, everything would be over. With that thought in mind, Bo Jiu lifted her leg and kicked towards Qin Mo. The sharp wind seemed to be able to split everything in half. Qin Mo took a step back, narrowing his eyes. He reached out once more, but this time, he didn't grab her arm like he had done at the Fifth Avenue. Instead, he went for the black mask on the youngster's face. Bo Jiu jolted. She used her left hand to block, turning beautifully. Even though the mask was caught, Qin Mo couldn't see her face. But without the mask, she wouldn't be able to face the Almighty. Even if she made some adjustments, the Almighty would definitely recognize her. It was too difficult. Bo Jiu jumped again, but this time, her luck wasn't as good. In order to avoid the youngster in front of her, she tilted slightly. It was this distance that allowed Qin Mo to grab onto her shirt again. Chapter 973. In the nick of time. A black motorcycle sped by the side of the street. The person on top was wearing a helmet. His eyes were deep and he had a gentle aura. If it wasn't Hoshino, who else could it be? He held onto the handlebars with one hand, turning his body and extending his hand in her direction. Swoosh! The youngster moved in mid-air, grabbing onto the person's hand. With a flip of her long legs, she climbed onto the motorcycle. His speed was very fast, and his movements were as graceful as flowing water. The drivers in the cars parked by the roadside were dumbfounded. Even if the crime squad reacted, it wouldn't be of any use. The heavy-duty motorcycle, be it the size, appearance or the sleek design, was a testament to its speed. It was like a wild leopard charging out, not easy to block. Qin Mo stood tall and straight, his eyes looking at the tomahawk gradually disappearing into the traffic, as if he had been abandoned by someone. He slowly clenched the black mask in his palm, and the aura that emanated from his back was extremely cold. Director Huang stood opposite him. The moment he saw the person escaping, his breathing became heavy. When he caught sight of the black mask in Qin Mo's hands, his eyes widened. "You removed Z's mask? Did you get a good look at his face? Do you need me to contact a technician to draw out Z's facial features based on your memory?" "I didn't see him." Qin Mo glanced up, replying calmly. Director Huang froze on the spot. Young Master Qin's gaze sent chills down his spine no matter how he looked at it. Cough. Director Huang started to reflect. "We didn't think things through. We didn't expect this to happen. Z is indeed a thorough person. He gave the thieves nearby a sum of money and instructed them to flee upon receiving orders. I've already questioned the one we caught. He doesn't know Z's face. He only gave a rough description of his height and clothing. The person you were chasing just now is him. The rest of the clues are pitiful." Qin Mo glanced at him. "Start with the motorcycle." Director Huang was confused. They wouldn't be able to find anything from the license plate. "It's a limited edition tomahawk. There aren't many in the country. Check the owner." Qin Mo's voice was calm. Before Director Huang could reply, his phone rang. The call was from the higher-ups. The tone of the call was not particularly good and carried too much emotion. Have you caught him? The culprit is skilled. We have to continue the investigation. Director Huang wiped his sweat as he spoke. His tone turned stern. You should be aware of the impact of this matter. It was such a public occasion and the mall was hacked, but the crime squad couldn't do anything about it. Director Huang, isn't it time for you to reflect on the crime squad's capabilities? We need to give the people an explanation, and even more so, we need to give an explanation to those who have been affected by this incident. Director Huang paused before replying, I understand. I don't need to say anything else. Even if what Z did wasn't a heinous crime, there are some problems that need to be solved in a proper way. What would the public say if a hacker found out about the unjust case from years ago and the police knew nothing about it? What will the higher-ups think? Director Huang inhaled deeply. Secretary Liang, I understand what you're trying to say. I don't really care about what the higher-ups think, but there are some unjust cases that should be uncovered by our own people, otherwise, it would be too much of a slap in the face. Secretary Liang frowned, but before he could speak, Director Huang added, there are still some loose ends to be done. Director Huang added, there are still some loose ends to be done. I don't think the most important thing now is to find Z. Instead, we should help an old comrade reverse the verdict and give his son an explanation. If it's really as the video says, that Rao Rong hasn't been able to seek redress for the past year, there must be an internal problem. Secretary Liang paused for a moment before saying, I agree with you on this point. I still have a meeting to attend, and it will be about today's incident. So, Old Huang, any evidence on your side is especially important. I've already submitted a proposal to deal with this organization. We will work with the United Nations Interpol, and the military will also send people over. They should be in Jiang City by now, and they will work together with the Key Case Investigation Unit. That's all for now. Director Huang listened to the other end of the call. He glanced over at the commercial plaza. The screen had switched back to the advertisement. It was as though the video hadn't existed. But it wasn't non-existent. The video had already spread online. With such a huge influence, it meant that Rao Rong's father's case had to be retried. And this time, no one dared to obstruct the retrial. With that in mind, Director Huang felt comforted. He finally understood what it meant to borrow the power of the masses. With the supervision of the masses, some matters would be sped up. But at the same time, he had witnessed Z's true terror. Fortunately, she had only exposed the truth and hadn't used her power for anything else. But did she come to China because someone had impersonated her? Director Huang couldn't help but ask Qin Mo. Qin Mo retracted his gaze, stuffed his left hand that was holding the black mask into his pocket, his voice indifferent. Perhaps. What did he mean by perhaps? Director Huang wanted to continue, but Qin Mo boarded the Land Rover. Qin Mo boarded the Land Rover parked by the roadside. Before he closed the door he added, the outcome of Rao Rong's father's case is crucial. Rao Rong will only tell the crime squad after finding the person who framed his father. Director Huang frowned. Shouldn't he cooperate with the investigation now? He won't. Qin Mo glanced at Director Huang, his expression calm. Because he doesn't trust the police. Director Huang shook his head. How did he become like this? After being hurt so many times, a person has to change. Qin Mo arched a brow, as though he was stating a fact. Around that year, he believed but realized he was hurt even more. If it wasn't out of hatred, no one would be foolish enough to get involved with a criminal. Director Huang clenched his teeth. This matter was more troublesome than he had expected. If they didn't investigate further, Rao Rong would probably hate them even more. It wasn't going to be easy. There's one more thing. Qin Mo glanced up, a glint lingering in his eyes. There are some things he didn't say because he wanted to say it during the trial. He was worried that if he said it now, the person who framed his father would have a way to avoid it. You should think about who in the internal department would have that ability. Director Huang froze. He had thought about the conditions Qin Mo had mentioned. It seemed like it was time to take this issue seriously. The Land Rover drove off. The chauffeur sat in the front and wanted to drive straight back to the courtyard. But he heard his young master's voice from behind. Turn left. Turn left? Where was he going? The chauffeur didn't dare to ask. Qin Mo sat in the back seat, glancing at the black mask in his hands. He whipped out his phone and dialed a number. Chen Xiaodong heard the sound in the living room and immediately picked up the phone. Hello, Fu family. Chen Xiaodong. Qin Mo's voice was faint. Chen Xiaodong felt his head go numb. Almighty Qin. It's me. Qin Mo's tone didn't change. Get your young master to the phone. Chen Xiaodong exclaimed. My young master isn't home. He moved to the school. Young master Qin, why don't you call him? School. Inexplicably, Qin Mo felt as though he had heard wrongly. However, his smart judgment told him that he hadn't heard wrongly. His voice suddenly turned cold. Which school? Chen Xiaodong thought it couldn't be. What kind of world was Almighty Qin living in? He didn't even know about school. He moved to the male dormitory and only comes back on Saturdays. It would have been better if Chen Xiaodong hadn't explained. Qin Mo wouldn't have such a strong image. The moment he explained, his gaze deepened. He tightened the mask in his hands and knocked on the car door. The sound didn't just startle the chauffeur, it also confused Chen Xiaodong. What was going on? The chauffeur sat in the front, watching his young master's cold and handsome face. Someone was going to be in trouble today. Indeed, someone was going to be in trouble. Fan Jia had never expected things to turn out this way. Z. The person who should have died a long time ago. How could she ruin her plans to such an extent? She had to make preparations to retreat. But she wasn't willing to leave just like that. Perhaps there was another way. Fan Jia narrowed her eyes, trying to maximize the benefits she and her partner could get. As long as someone warned Rao Rong, he wouldn't say anything. Come to think of it, even if she didn't warn him, with Rao Rong's intelligence, he wouldn't go all out. Rao Rong didn't know who killed his father. She was the only one in the know. If she exposed it, it would be a secret forever. There was no information, no files. Even the judge had retired. The case had been in the past for so long, it wasn't easy to investigate. Besides, a truly powerful person wouldn't kill someone personally. Of course, they would do it from a higher position. Unless there was a thorough investigation, it wouldn't be easy to find out who the culprit was. Rao Rong was well aware of this matter. Before the culprit surfaced, he wouldn't say much. Besides, even if Rao Rong leaked her information, it wouldn't be the same. She wasn't the same as when she had met him. It was just that she had lost some information. However, some information was indeed fatal to her. Hence, she had to make some preparations. Fan Jia clenched her fists. The main point was the information released by the person who was supposed to be dead. How did he know which school she was in and how did he manage to deduce her current identity? Her brother was right. If she wanted to get what she wanted, she had to get rid of Z first. Previously, she had used Qin Mo. Even though it hadn't been successful, it had been effective. But this time, since Qin Mo had lost a portion of his memory, didn't that mean that the chances of success would be much higher? Besides, those people didn't want Qin Mo to have any contact with Z. Everyone hoped that he could think rationally and without any emotions, right? In reality, Fan Jia still couldn't understand why he treated Z differently. However, this difference made her want him even more. Fan Jia? Fan Jia? The voice beside her snapped Fan Jia back to her senses. What is it? We are going to meet at the school gates. Do you want to come? Sure. Wait for me to go get something. At times like this, she had to act as she usually did. Even though there was a temporary setback and the plan had to be delayed, it didn't mean she didn't have a chance of winning. Fan Jia pushed the door open and entered the dormitory. She dialed a number. Rao Rong has betrayed us. Either the crime squad won't be able to find anything or he will shut his mouth forever. It will be easier for you to take action. The person on the other end inhaled deeply. Are you crazy? Why are you taking such a risk? Do you know how strict the investigation is? No matter how strict the investigation is, as long as there is no evidence, you won't be able to get a verdict even if you are suspected, right? Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. Besides, it was that person's idea to make Rao Rong's father disappear. With him protecting you, what are you afraid of? Do you know when he will stop protecting you? Even if you don't do anything and wait for the internal investigation, that person will have no choice but to separate from you in order to protect himself. Back then, the cleanup was done so cleanly. Even if there is any information left, it won't be found out. You can either attack or wait for your death. Think about it carefully. A middle-aged man in uniform stood in the corridor, his forehead covered in a layer of sweat. Ever since he had seen the video, he had a feeling. He couldn't hold on any longer. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and enter the meeting. Yes, I'm coming. The man looked at the back of the person in front of him, and the girl's words kept echoing in his mind. She was right. Either he caused a commotion, or he would be cut off. Instead of being passive, he might as well take the initiative now. It was a huge meeting with the leader in charge. The entire process was carried out in secret. There was a change in the weather. The wind blew against the youngster's clothes, allowing her to relax slightly. She smiled. That was close. Hoshino did not comment. After all, every time the youth did something it was to a certain extent. When was he not arrogant and bold? But Qin Mo was indeed the toughest opponent they had ever met. Drop me off at the front, I'll take the train back, it's one stop away. Just then, her phone rang, the caller ID from the Fu family's house. Bo Jiu arched a brow. Hello. Young master, it's me. Chen Xiaodong seemed to have been triggered by something, his voice breaking. Bo Jiu replied, I know it's you, why? Young Master Qin called just now. He wanted you to answer the phone. I told him you weren't home, you went to stay in school, but he seemed angry, I don't know why. Chapter 974. Young Master. Isn't it weird? If young Master Qin wants to look for you, he can just call your phone. Why did he call my house? When I picked up the call, my scalp went numb. Even though young Master Qin's voice sounds nice, it's still scary. As a butler, Chen Xiaodong was a little naggy. But it was his nagging that made Bo Jiu frown. Xiaodong. MMH? Chen Xiaodong didn't understand why his young master was calling him that. Bo Jiu's gaze dimmed. I have something to do. I'll hang up first. If young Master Qin calls again, tell him I'm in school. That's what I said, Before Chen Xiaodong could finish his sentence, the busy tone came from the other end. Bo Jiu flipped over. She held her backpack with one hand and pulled open her jacket with the other. She tossed it into the bin at the side. Her movements were swift. Hoshino immediately realized something. Did something happen? Qin Mo is suspecting me. Bo Jiu paused. He suspects that I'm the one in the plaza. Hoshino's gaze stilled. Do you want to leave? Bo Jiu glanced up and shook her head, her voice low. The National League hasn't started yet. I'll leave after Supreme Alliance wins. Hoshino watched the youngster. After a long moment he said, I'll arrange a special passage to prevent any difficulties. MMH. Bo Jiu swiftly changed her appearance, leaving only her hair. She couldn't do it here. She had to return to the dormitory and create an alibi. There was one more thing she had to do. She had to reach school before the Almighty. Bo Jiu glanced at the main road, turning towards Hoshino. Head from the east, leave the car at an area with many stolen cars and hail a cab back. All right. Hoshino's aura didn't change, his long legs supporting the left side of the motorcycle. Be careful, if we're discovered, we'll head back to Fifth Avenue. Bo Jiu nodded, rushing into the subway station. She glanced down at the time on her wrist, thankful that it was a traffic jam. If not, they wouldn't have been able to shake off the crime squad car so easily. But even so, there were still cameras on the road. The police might not have the video of them passing through the alleys, but as long as they appeared on the main road, there would be clues. Even if these clues were not found now, in less than half a day's time, all the major checkpoints would be checking the vehicles. Therefore, she and Hoshino had to seize the time and act separately. Bo Jiu had already thought about this. The only thing she didn't expect was the phone call from the Almighty. Just like what Chen Xiaodong said, if the Almighty was really looking for her, he could have just called her or sent her a WeChat message. But the Almighty called the Fu family directly. He wasn't looking for her. He wanted to see if she was at home and if she had an alibi. Bo Jiu gripped the handrail in the train, her eyes bright. As expected, it was never easy to shake off the Almighty's pursuit. Her time was running out. Bo Jiu glanced down at her wrist. Once the train reached the station, she took large strides towards the crowd. Her speed was very fast. Her hair was still black, which meant that she had to wash off the paint on it. In order to prevent being caught by the Almighty in school, Bo Jiu chose to enter from the back door. This meant that she had to climb over the wall. The back door of number 1 middle school was next to number 2 middle school. Bo Jiu tugged her collar with one hand and was about to move. Before the thorn-head youngster could walk over, he said, F***CK, it's already night time. Expert, why are you climbing over the wall? Aren't you afraid of being caught by the headmaster? Bo Jiu paused, turning to look at a certain Chinibyu. Hey, your hair is dyed black. When I saw your back, my instincts told me it was you. I never expected it to be you. Bo Jiu held her forehead, sighing deeply. She scanned the things in his hands and pulled him over. You're wasting my time, do you know that? Bring the bowl of noodles over. Bowl of noodles? No, I was busy with my date and didn't have a proper meal. The canteen doesn't even cook. This is my only ration and I even snatched it from my little brother. Bo Jiu reached out. Give it to me. F***CK, you're robbing, do you understand? Is it a trend for good students to rob bad students? Bo Jiu didn't care what he was yelling at the back, grabbing his lunchbox. She used one hand to support herself against the tree trunk and took large strides, climbing up the wall. She stood there and jumped down. Her movements were fast and suave. The boss of number 2 middle school, who had wanted to snatch his bowl of noodles back, hesitated. In the end, he decided to buy another bowl since his skills weren't as good as the other parties. If he climbed over the wall and lost, it would be embarrassing. He was someone with a girlfriend now, he had to take care of his image. Bo Jiu walked quickly, especially when night fell. She was like a silent shadow. When she appeared in the dormitory, the 2 roommates who had skipped the night revision session and were playing poker were shocked. Boss, why are you so quiet when you walk? Your hair. Bo Jiu glanced at them and said, If Almighty Qin asks later, tell him I've been in the dormitory the whole time and never left, understand? They didn't really understand. The 2 people who skipped class were confused, but looking at the young man's cold and ruthless face, no one dared to object. After all, the school hunk had won their respect from the moment he entered their dormitory. Even if they were suspicious that Almighty Qin's visit to their boss was just a fantasy, they couldn't expose it, right? Once she entered the dormitory, Bo Jiu turned on the hot water and soaked the instant noodles before entering the bathroom. Number 1 middle school was indeed the best high school in Jiang City. Even the dormitory was a 5-star one with a shower area. Bo Jiu glanced at herself in the mirror. She lowered her head and aimed it at the faucet of the sink, not caring if it was cold water or not. The white foam from the shampoo swept across the corner of her eyes, the dark color fading away slowly, returning to its original silver color. Outside the school, Jiang Zhou had rushed to the entrance after receiving the call. When he saw Qin Mo's cold aura, he couldn't help but ask curiously, Young Master Fu just wants to stay in the dormitory and experience group life. Why are you so angry? Qin Mo didn't reply, walking into the school entrance. The male dormitory wasn't far away. Jiang Zhou laughed mischievously. It can't be, you still haven't settled that person. Qin Mo turned and glanced at Jiang Zhou, his tone calm. You still haven't settled Shui Yao Yao and she seems to be rejecting you. Jiang Zhou's fingers stilled and he laughed. Is that the same? You should know that I'm not as serious as you. I'm not bent by a single person, but what exactly is your little spade thinking? Does he want to stay in the dormitory and study hard? It can't be. We're here, this is the dormitory, I just found it for you. Qin Mo didn't say another word as he walked in. Even though number 1 middle school's facilities were good, it was a famous school with a long history. Hence, there weren't any elevators in the dormitory, which meant they had to walk up the stairs. The moment Qin Mo walked in, he attracted many people's attention. Moreover, Jiang Zhou was following behind him. The appearance of the 2 male almighties of number 1 middle school made everyone excited. The boys' world was that simple. To them, Qin Mo was the strongest boss in the history of number 1 middle school. They could see each other usually. After all, it was rare for Qin Feng to return to the school for a visit. But for him to appear in the male dormitory, it was a miracle among miracles. There were already many people taking out their phones to take pictures. Some of Qin Mo's fans were even more passionate, shouting from behind, "Almighty Qin, you have to win the National League." Qin Mo was already on the second floor. It was hard for him to react. Jiang Zhou chuckled. "You seem more popular than before. Supreme Alliance is really popular. How does it feel to be liked by so many boys?" "I don't feel anything." Qin Mo glanced at him, gesturing for him to shut up. "Wait for me downstairs. I have something to discuss with that guy." Jiang Zhou arched a brow, smiling. "You need someone to guard the door. I'll guard the door for you and help you clear the area." "Up to you." Qin Mo went up to the third floor and saw a group of half-naked high school students. They were holding a wash basin, baggy pants and a double trolley board. They were probably washing their clothes in the study room. Qin Mo frowned at their attire because one of them was running around in his underwear. Qin Mo's gaze turned colder at the thought of a certain someone living in such an environment. However, whether that guy really lived here or if it was just a disguise was yet to be verified. Along the way, they stepped on the rubbish on the ground. The smell spreading was definitely not pleasant. Jiang Zhou's faint smile finally broke. He reached out to press his nose and mouth. As for the boys on both sides of the corridor, when they saw the two of them, they seemed to be petrified and just stood there in a daze. There was only one thought in their minds. F***ck, why did Almighty Qin come to such a state? The one in his underwear was afraid of hurting Almighty Qin's eyes, so he hid behind the wall, covering his lower body with both hands, wishing that he was transparent. Humans were like this. If a bunch of guys were shirtless and didn't wear pants, no one would think much of it. But suddenly, an extremely clean person came in, and that person was the idol of their male god, so their faces were a little hot. Four-Eyed, who was standing at the door with his lunchbox in hand, was also blushing. Who could explain to him what was going on? Why did Almighty Qin stop in front of their dormitory, stuffing one hand into his pocket and arching a brow at him? Even though he didn't want to admit it, as a man, their heights weren't just a little different. "Knock on the door." Qin Mo's voice had always been calm, but it always had a natural aura that made people who heard it want to execute it uncontrollably. Four-Eyed turned and knocked on the door silently. Honestly, no one in the dormitory could hear him knocking on the door. Four-Eyed felt that young Master Qin's presence made it harder for him to enter the room. Usually, he would just kick the door open. That was the correct way to enter the dormitory. He was so refined, but he really didn't. Jiang Zhou could ease the atmosphere. "Isn't it night self-study session? There are many people back. It hasn't been very strict recently. Boys after all." Four-Eyed chuckled, his eyes drifting over to Almighty Qin's cold and indifferent side profile. Someone should have opened the door. It was fine if he skipped class, but didn't he know how to come out and get his food? Since Qin Mo and Jiang Zhou were standing there at the same time, room 419 became the focus of attention in the corridor. They had a premonition that the dormitory was going to be popular. First, the school hunk moved in, and now young Master Qin. In the past, they wouldn't have imagined this. The four-eyed man didn't feel much pressure. Under the piercing glare, he took a deep breath and knocked on the wooden door 3 times. F***ck, who is it? I'm still playing games. It should be four-eyed. Our food is definitely here. Hey, that's good. The man opened the door as he spoke. You really are four-eyed. Come, let me see what you bought. What 2 words? The man couldn't finish his sentence. This. What was with Almighty Qin and young Master Jiang beside him? All of a sudden, the man was reminded of his new boss's words. He turned his head and opened his mouth. He wanted to ask his new boss to come out of the bathroom, but unexpectedly, the youngster was already sitting in front of the wooden table. His hair seemed to have just been washed as it was still dripping water. His back was facing him, his head lowered as he fiddled with a bowl of instant noodles, seemingly waiting for it to be cooked. This. When did the new boss come out? Wasn't he a little too fast when he opened the door? Qin Mo glanced up at the man who was petrified in front of him. He reached out to push him away and walked in. The man who was coming down from the top bunk almost tripped and fell when he saw this scene. When the man at the door snapped back to his senses, he called out anxiously, "Boss!" When she had heard the knocking, Bo Jiu had already guessed that it was the Almighty. She arched a brow and turned back with the plastic fork that came with the bowl of noodles. The Almighty was standing at the messy entrance of the dormitory. He was dressed in a trench coat, his long legs tall and straight. His elegance and cleanliness were a stark contrast to the surroundings. No matter what, she felt a little guilty. Chapter 975. Qin Mo watched as the youngster's silver hair dripped with water, her expression unguarded. Her gaze was as clear as ever, as though she didn't know anything. Qin Mo took a step forward. The person who almost fell from the upper bunk hurriedly retracted his hand, burrowing into the blanket. It was a pity that he had to cover his upper body in the summer. Bo Jiao could feel the oppressive aura inching closer to her. She didn't know if her roommates would believe her if she told them that the Almighty was bored and wanted to play with her. All of you leave. This was Qin Mo's first sentence, his faint voice tinged with coldness. Although it was only 6 words, it made the backs of the other 3 people in the dormitory stiffen. They looked at each other, quickly packed up their things, and stood in the safe area. The so-called safe zone was the place beside Jiang Zhua, who had a faint smile on his face. It seems like we've disturbed them. Jiang Zhua patted one of their shoulders. Let's have a smoke outside. The person nodded. What else could they do? They couldn't defeat young Master Qin. Besides, young Master Qin looked like he wanted revenge. It wasn't because they didn't have a collective sense of honor. It wasn't because they didn't want to stand on their new boss's side. Even if they were to make a move, they would just be adding to young Master Qin's side. Wait a minute. Qin Mo turned, his gaze sweeping over the 3 of them. She has been here the entire time, she hasn't left. Bo Jiao heard the exclamation, her heart sinking. Fortunately, Four Eyes was more reliable. He pushed his spectacles up and tried to remain calm. No, she has. Boss even showed his face in class and bought a bowl of instant noodles. Bo Jiao smiled faintly. This was the perfect excuse. As expected, those who were well-educated were better at lying. As expected of the weirdest student in their dormitory. Qin Mo glanced at Four Eyes, his gaze shifting towards the other 2. That fleeting gaze made him chuckle coldly. Is that so? Yes, Almighty Qin, you don't know how hard it is to persevere at night. The Thornhead finally regained his sense of existence. But it was obvious that based on Bo Jiao's understanding of the Almighty, he didn't believe her. She hadn't left. Fortunately, she wasn't tricked by her teammate. Done. Jiang Zhua reached out and pulled the door handle over. He said meaningfully, you 2 have a good chat. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Just keep the commotion down. I'll be guarding the door. Bo Jiao watched Jiang Zhua smile, which made him look like a pimp. After closing the door, the other 3 finally heaved a sigh of relief. When young Master Qin caught them and asked them questions, their hearts were in their throats. But boss was amazing. How did he know what young Master Qin would ask them? Needless to say, their acting just now was top-notch. After admiring themselves, the 3 of them couldn't help but be curious. They asked Jiang Zhua, young Master Jiang, what happened between young Master Qin and our boss? Did you have a conflict? Jiang Zhua leaned against the door, his head tilted as he lit a cigarette. He held it between his fingers and smiled. How can it be a conflict? They are discussing matters regarding tomorrow's competition, so we can't disturb them, understand? As for how to negotiate, that would depend on Qin Mo honestly. Jiang Zhua rarely saw Qin Mo like today. It was rare to see him exuding such a cold aura from the inside out. Hopefully, everything was fine. Jiang Zhua flicked the cigarette ash in his hand, glancing at the messy tunnel. He felt that it was better to remind Qin Mo to hurry up. If he stayed in such an environment, he would smell. But Qin Mo wasn't going to check his messages. He allowed his phone to vibrate as he stuffed a hand into his pocket. He stood in front of Bo Jiao, looking down at her with an indifferent gaze. He didn't say a word, his gaze sending goosebumps down Bo Jiao's back. Bo Jiao's lashes fluttered. Qin Mo reached out, touching the bowl of noodles on the table. It was warm, proving that there was indeed water inside. Bo Jiao glanced up, watching the fair hand in front of her, each nail trimmed neatly. But that didn't mean he was harmless. His actions proved that the Almighty was suspicious of her. For 19, did you move in because of the dorm name? Qin Mo asked coldly. Bojo stilled. I didn't notice the dorm number. Is that so? Qin Mo watched the youngster's face. Bojo revealed her tiger teeth, smiling faintly. I'm a righteous person. I wouldn't think in that direction. Including seeing so many naked men walking around. Qin Mo's gaze darkened. Bojo felt that she had to save herself at this moment. She caressed her nose. After seeing you, these people are like a pile of bones. I'm not interested. Qin Mo paused. Be more serious. I am. Bojo laughed. Brother Mo, you aren't angry with me, right? Qin Mo watched her. His gaze deep and unreadable. I can stop being angry. Sing me a song. Bojo smiled. Sure. What song do you want to hear? The Ordinary Road, Qin Mo replied faintly. But it was the name that made Bojo's fingers freeze for a moment. All right, I'll search for the lyrics. Just as she lowered her head to search, Qin Mo placed his hands on both sides of her. Qin Mo placed his hands on both sides of her and lowered his body. This way, they were very close to each other, so close that their breaths could touch each other's faces. Fortunately, Jiangsu had brought the people from the dormitory out. Otherwise, it would be hard not to think too much if someone saw their posture. Bojo's heart tightened. This was undoubtedly the Almighty's interrogation method against her. Qin Mo watched her for a moment, his lips lifting into a devilish smile. Joe, do you know that a person's heart beats faster when they are lying? Bojo lifted her head, her face serious. I don't know if I'm lying, but when you are so close to me, my heart beats faster. Do I have to touch your chest and ask questions? Qin Mo smiled, looking warm, but Bojo knew it wasn't warm at all because there wasn't a hint of a smile in his eyes. The Almighty's gaze moved from her face to the ends of her hair. His left hand reached out, reaching under the hem of her top. He lifted it up and held onto her softness. Bojo trembled. Chapter 976. That's the inconvenience of staying in the male dormitory. I want to take a shower before they all return. Her excuse was flawless. Qin Mo laughed again. He leaned against her, and there seemed to be a coldness at the corner of his mouth. Bojo couldn't help but shrink back due to the strength of his fingers. However, Qin Mo was faster than her. He held the back of her head and watched as the water dripped from the youngster's silver hair landed on her delicate and fair collarbone. Qin Mo's eyes deepened and he retracted his hand. After regaining her freedom, Bojo wanted to stand up. Qin Mo took out a black mask from his pocket. He looked at her and asked slowly, "Do you recognize this?" Bojo didn't have time to reply. Qin Mo had already placed the mask on her face. Bojo's heart trembled. She tried her best to look natural. Bojo knew where the mask had come from. It was the one that had been removed by the Almighty during their fight. The black mask accentuated the youth's beautiful eyes, making them look as bright as stars. Qin Mo watched the familiar brows peeking through the black mask, his gaze deepening. His fingers caressed the edge of Bojo's mask, lowering his body. You really look alike. Bojo didn't dodge. What does it look like? Like Z. The moment he said that, her back stiffened. It wasn't because of the Almighty's words, but because of the sudden kiss. Through the mask, he landed a kiss on her lips. Through the black cotton. His breath was filled with a faint scent. That kind of kiss could easily make one's heart palpitate. It was as if all the fragments of his brain had been sucked out. He couldn't think about anything else. It's you, right? A cool breath hit her ear. His handsome face vaguely carried a hint of bewitchment. The person at the commercial square today. That sentence jolted her back to her senses. She didn't deny it directly. Instead, she asked with a pair of confused eyes, "What commercial plaza?" Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. He stared at the face in front of him that always made him lose his rationality. His thoughts drifted. Wasn't it her? Brother Mo, why aren't you saying anything? Bojo seized the chance, asking, "What commercial plaza?" It's nothing. Qin Mo was wearing a trench coat. His black hair was a little messy. Coupled with his face, He looked indescribably sexy. Then, he reached out and took off his trench coat, placing it over someone's head. Bojo paused. Brother Emo, don't tell me you still don't want to see my face? Who knew that as soon as she finished her sentence? His whole body was lifted up by someone. His lower abdomen was pressed against his shoulder, and his head was hanging down. It was not a comfortable position. Bojo was about to move when she heard his cold voice. Do you want the whole school to know how I carried you out? Bojo quietened down. After all, if word of this got out, she would be the one who would be embarrassed. Just thinking about it made the rumors terrifying. For example, when she chased after the Almighty couldn't stand it anymore and planned to dispose of her like a pile of trash. If she attached a photo to prove the truth, then she would really become famous in the school. She was still a boy. Which school hunk would be carried out like this? Hence, a wise man submits to circumstances. It was better for her to be quiet. The other people in room 419 were still asking Jiangsu about young Master Qin when the door in front of them opened. Qin Emo walked out with a pile of people on his shoulder? The guys from room 419 glanced at each other. They didn't need to think to know who young Master Qin was carrying. It couldn't be anyone other than the school hunk. However, in their minds, their boss was already extremely skilled. How good was young Master Qin at fighting? How could he defeat their boss in just a few minutes? Moreover, he even wanted to take him away. Qin Emo seemed to have noticed their gazes. He tilted his head, his eyes meeting theirs. What is it? Nothing. Nothing. One of them immediately stepped aside. Even though Bojo couldn't see her surroundings since her face was covered, she could hear their deep breaths and their voices. She knew what was going on. There must be a lot of people watching her. In the past, Bojo felt that the Almighty's habit of covering her with his jacket wasn't desirable. Now, Bojo grabbed onto the trench coat, afraid it would fall off. Jiangsu chuckled playfully. He turned to Qin Emo. You're really something. That works too. Qin Emo didn't reply. He carried a certain someone on his shoulder and walked out of the male dormitory under the watchful eyes of the guys. Then he stuffed Bojo into the back seat of the Land Rover. Jiangsu, who had been following behind him, seemed to have noticed something. His gaze landed on the figure that was smiling lightly at the boy. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes, his tone still sounding like a playboy. Leave first, I have something on. I won't disturb you from teaching your little spade a lesson. Bojo listened to Jiangsu's gloating tone. Her situation wasn't as good as it seemed. From the looks of it, the Almighty's suspicions towards her hadn't been dispelled. Moreover, she was staying in the male dormitory. The Almighty didn't seem happy from his tone just now. As expected, the moment the Almighty came over, he carried her and placed her on his long legs. His voice was slow and deep. Don't worry, I won't touch you now. I'll deal with you when we get home. Bojo replied. Brother Emo, you should touch me now. The driver is here. Qin Emo sniffed the scent of the youngster's hair. Everything seemed right. When there's no one around, it was too obvious what the Almighty was trying to say. Bojo felt that the interrogation would be more intense than the one in the male dormitory. Why did the Almighty have his eyes on her? She had tried to cover up every single detail. Moreover, the Almighty's suspicions had reached an unbridled stage. He called Fatty right in front of her. Help me check the surveillance cameras in number 1 middle school. See if anyone climbed over the wall today. No, you don't have to look for any suspicious people. Just look for Little Spade's video. Bojo replied sincerely, Brother Emo, I don't always climb over the wall. I still use the main entrance. Qin Emo ignored her interruption and continued to order. Send me a copy of the surveillance footage from the classroom, between 7 and 8. See if Little Spade is around. Captain, why are you investigating Little Spade all of a sudden? Bojo was about to reply when Qin Mo's voice rang out again. Qin Mo's voice rose again. She always skips classes. She's so disobedient, Fatty replied before hanging up. Chapter 977. The night deepened a notch. The students of number 1 middle school had just finished their night revision. The entire school was brightly lit, especially the supper windows and small shops. There were many people queuing up. As the weather got warmer, there were more people buying ice water and Coke. Compared to when they first entered number 1 middle school, all the students were freed. The long forest was filled with people walking, and there were also some girls discussing topics and where to shop on Sunday. Shui Yaoyao had wanted to use this time to play a few games at the internet cafe. Practicing her hand speed had become a habit of hers. She hadn't expected to be stopped by a boy she usually chatted with. The boy was from the next class. He stood tall and handsome in front of Shui Yaoyao, holding a basketball in his hand. He was the type of handsome boy with a good personality. When he smiled, his canine teeth would be revealed, adding to his good looks. This type of boy was well liked in school. Hence, Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected him to stop her. Behind him were 2 of his best friends. "We have a game later, do you want to watch?" the boy asked. Shui Yaoyao was still holding her book, smiling as she rejected him. The boy smiled. "Forget it. I'll change the question. Do you want to be my girlfriend?" Shui Yaoyao paused, lifting her head, about to reject him. Suddenly, a voice with a hint of a smile came from behind her. "Yao Yao, I don't think Auntie wants you to date in high school. Puppy love is forbidden in number 1 middle school." Shui Yaoyao's back froze. Even without turning back, she knew who the person was. The boy who confessed to her looked at Jiang Zhua, who was holding a cigarette in one hand and had an outstanding aura. His eyes widened. "Young Master Jiang." Jiang Zhua walked over, a cigarette in one hand, the other naturally placed on Shui Yaoyao's shoulder. He whispered into her ear, "Why don't you tell your classmates that you can't date for the next 3 years? MMH?" Shui Yaoyao's body stiffened even more. She knew Jiang Zhua was reminding her of the time limit of their contract. She couldn't have a boyfriend for the next 3 years. That was the condition they had agreed on from the start. The boy didn't know what was going on. He really thought that she was more sensitive in high school and had to wait until after her sophomore year. His eyes dimmed. Shui Yaoyao looked at him. This was the first time someone had confessed to her. In the past, she had never been discovered by anyone, so why would anyone confess to her? Shui Yaoyao looked up and said, "Sorry," the boy interrupted her with a smile. "It's okay. You want to go to C University, right? I'll apply for that school too." This time, Shui Yaoyao was really stunned. When she said these words, it was a long time ago. At that time, she hadn't slimmed down and hadn't become an official Supreme Alliance member. She had just returned to school. "How did you know?" The boy looked at Shui Yaoyao, his gaze deep. "The first time I noticed you, you were helping your brother pack his bag. I always felt that you were very gentle. After that, I unknowingly wanted to know more about you, so I asked around." Shui Yaoyao was shocked. She never thought that someone would notice her at that time. Moreover, this person had always been a topic of discussion among girls. The boy noticed Shui Yaoyao's gaze and smiled again, his face a little red. "You probably don't remember, but there was one time when I hurt my leg while playing basketball. I was sitting at the railing and you happened to pass me a band-aid. You even helped me wash my wound with water. At that time, I wanted to tell you that I really like you, Shui Yaoyao. I really like you." Shui Yaoyao's eyes trembled slightly. She looked into the boy's clear eyes. She wasn't like what he thought. He deserved a better girl. At least not someone like her who had already signed a contract with someone else. Jiang Zhua stood beside Shui Yaoyao. He looked at the person's side profile. His fingers subconsciously tightened. The frustration in his chest intensified with Shui Yaoyao's reaction, as though he was really about to lose something. He pulled Shui Yaoyao's wrist over, his smile devilish. "She won't go to C University. She will only come to a university. And I forgot to tell you, actually, we are in a relationship like yours." With that, Jiang Zhua pulled Shui Yaoyao into his arms, followed by a kiss, even though it was just a light peck. But at that moment, the boy was already frozen on the spot. Looking at this scene, his throat felt like it was blocked by something, and it was a little sour and uncomfortable. Jiang Zhua didn't give him a chance to speak, his fingers holding Shui Yaoyao's wrist as he strode out of the school. Along the way, many people turned back to look at them. "Is that young Master Jiang?" "Yes, it really is." "Why is young Master Jiang here? Did he come back with young Master Qin to give a speech as an outstanding graduate?" When did that happen? Young Master Zhang doesn't come here often. Isn't the person he's holding Shui Yaoyao's hand? Didn't Shui Yaoyao do all sorts of shameless things to chase after young Master Zhang, making him annoyed? Why is it now? You still don't know? Know what? Shui Yaoyao's mother married into the Zhang family. Young Master Zhang is probably here to bring her home. Stop spreading rumors. Although Shui Yaoyao really liked young Master Zhang, she never did anything. It's just that her diary seemed to have been leaked by someone. Everyone has one or two crushes. If you continue spreading rumors, it'll be too much. I'm relieved to hear that. Even though I don't hate Shui Yaoyao, she shouldn't have chased after young Master Zhang. The difference between them is too big. Shui Yaoyao listened to the discussions, but she didn't seem to feel much. It was probably because she had heard it for too long and was used to the difference between them. Similarly, she knew that if she caused a ruckus in school, it would only embarrass Zhang Zhua. There wasn't a need. It was probably because she had calmed down that she handled things differently from before. There's no one here now, you can let go of me. After leaving the school, Shui Yaoyao spoke calmly. She was very protective of her hand, not because she was spoiled, but because she had to participate in the most important competition tomorrow. The National League had finally come to this stage. Shui Yaoyao placed all her thoughts on it. She didn't notice that Zhang Zua's side profile was so cold that it wasn't normal. Zhang Zua was wondering why she couldn't be like before. Even when she had heard the boy's confession, her reaction had become the reason for Zhang Zua's subconscious annoyance. He knew he wasn't in the right state of mind, but the scene just now was like a well-edited movie, replaying in his mind continuously. Zhang Zua clenched his fists, his voice turning cold. I brought you out to let you know your current status. Shui Yaoyao looked at him. I already know. Today isn't the appointed time. I need to play a few games. As for the problem you are worried about, it won't happen for the next 3 years. Young Master Zhang, please do as you please. He had said before that he didn't like dirty people, and the hint he gave her was very obvious. But Shui Yaoyao didn't understand. She had already told him to do as he pleased, but he still followed behind her. At the start, his expression was cold. After walking for a while, when he saw that she had really gone to the internet cafe, his expression turned nonchalant. He even got Uncle Ian to open a computer and sat beside her. Shui Yaoyao didn't bother about him. Young Master's mood was probably that carefree sometimes. She took out her phone and opened Her Highness Jiu's WeChat. She was prepared to let Her Highness Jiu play a game with her so they could familiarize themselves with the game. The moment she typed, the phone was snatched over. Zhang Zhua looked at her, his usual demeanor at the nightclub. The person you're looking for is being beaten up by Qin Mo. Are you sending him a WeChat message so that Qin Mo can beat him up even more? The truth was just as Zhang Zhua had said. Bo Jiu sat in the car, thinking about how to resist the Almighty's beauty and interrogation. As for the classroom, she wasn't worried. She wouldn't act so casually if she hadn't done some preparations. She was worried about what other tricks the Almighty had up his sleeves. The kiss and singing through the mask proved that the Almighty was 90% suspicious of her. Only the Almighty would suspect her. Even until now, Smith hadn't thought of her. There was also the fight at the square. If the Almighty had brought along the special forces from the cinema, she would have been caught on the spot even if Hoshino had been there. Hence, luck was important in such a huge gamble. Bo Jiu smiled mischievously. She wasn't going to admit it was her. That was the only benefit of being reborn. Young Master, we're here. The driver stopped the car. Bo Jiu's ears twitched. Qin Mo spoke faintly into her ears through the windbreaker. Do you remember whose mask it is? Bo Jiu asked in confusion. Isn't it Brother Mo's? Qin Mo didn't reply. He glanced at the youngster wrapped in his windbreaker and reached out to carry her into the building, just like how he had carried a sack in school. Young Master, this is... Madame Zhang rushed over hurriedly. She could only see the youngster's long legs. Qin Mo replied, Young Master Jiu. Bo Jiu could clearly hear Madame Zhang's, ah. This time, she was embarrassed. Unlike what Bo Jiu had expected, the Almighty didn't interrogate her immediately. Instead, he cuffed her left wrist to the chair. Then he walked out. Bo Jiu reached out to remove the windbreaker. But the Almighty's voice came from outside. Princess, look at her. Princess looked as though he had been entrusted with something important. He leaped up valiantly, landing on top of her head. Then he sat there motionlessly. Seriously. It was rather heavy for such a fat cat to be placed on top of her head. Princess looked solemn as he sat there, wagging his tail. This was the first time Bo Jiu felt that her appearance was stupid. Fortunately, there wasn't anyone around. Qin Mo had come out because of a call from Fatty. Captain, I just checked and got the footage. Little Spade didn't climb the wall. He was sleeping in the classroom and was punished with frog jumps. Captain, do you want to watch Little Spade do the frog jumps? It's enough to make you laugh for the entire day. Fatty's voice turned softer as he spoke. Even through the phone, he could feel his captain's icy cold aura. Little Spade, what exactly did you do to make Captain feel so down? Was he in the classroom the entire time? Qin Mo's gaze dimmed. Didn't he go out? It should be. With his captain's words, Fatty started to doubt himself. Qin Mo replied faintly, I understand, send me all the footage. Yes. After Fatty hung up, he touched his forehead, which was covered in sweat. Captain's aura was exceptionally strong today. Was it because of the finals tomorrow? Fatty wasn't aware that before Qin Mo's call, Director Huang had sent him a message. It was regarding the motorcycle. We've found out who the owner is, but the car was reported lost a day ago. The person who lost the car is also from the esports industry, but he isn't from Tokyo. He's the captain of the Japanese team, Xiaofan. We've checked his background. The esports industry is really different. Even the young master of the mafia is there. However, we've eliminated his alibi. He was in a video conference with a bunch of Dragonmouth subordinates that day, and the staff can testify that he was looking for his tomahawk. We followed the trail and confirmed that the car wasn't just transferred once, it had been transferred before, which means that he really lost the car. When he saw Xiaofan's name, Qin Mo's gaze changed. The further he looked, the colder his gaze became. That was because he recalled the two figures that had disappeared in front of his eyes. They had a tacit understanding with each other. Qin Mo lowered his lids and typed. It's true that the car was lost, but who do you think would have the guts to steal a car from the Mafia Young Master? Or is the Mafia Young Master just a decoration and the tomahawk can be stolen so easily? Director Huang was confused. Isn't Z always that bold? That you're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.